Online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 3 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Do we really need more cheap, low-skilled foreign labour? Is this just a way to undercut British workers and make us all take part in this giant mass migration Ponzi scheme to keep inflation down? And we'll be getting stuck right into that. Now, the BBC, yes, they are currently being grilled anyway, the BBC bigwigs. I'll keep you up to date if there are any developments on that. But there was a victory last night. The Lords have backed down over the illegal migration bill, which is something that I know a lot of our wonderful viewers and listeners hold dear to their hearts. So I'll be discussing, importantly, what happens now. Are there any more legal hurdles it's got to get through? Will a flight to Rwanda ever be taking off? So we'll be discussing all of that. And yes, this story as well. Well, apparently, dwarves are now losing film roles. Is this kind of peak woke just eating itself alive? Patrick Christys, GB News. Yes, we're also going to be discussing the local opposition, anyway, to quite a large-scale mosque opening up at a bustling, iconic tourist attraction in London. GB Views at gbnews.com. Lots to go out, but right now, here's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you very much and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The BBC's Director General says he has asked for a quick look at what is red flagged to ensure consistency during the period by which the review is carried out into the handling of allegations made against Hugh Edwards. The House of Lords Committee asked the corporation why it didn't take allegations against its most highly paid news presenter more seriously sooner. It follows the allegations by The Sun that Mr Edwards paid a young person for explicit images, while Mr Davey says the investigation could take a while to reach a conclusion.
It's difficult to give you a precise time on that. The reason is because you have to go through that diligently, assess the information. There's also duty of care concerns within that. So on that one specifically, because I'm not in control of all the variables, that could take weeks or it could take a couple of months, depending on, or even longer, depending on what we get, and managing the individuals involved flawlessly. My main priority is to be fair, make sure we get all the information into that process, and act judiciously.
The Home Office says the first asylum seekers will be moved to the Bibi Stockholm migrant barge next week. The Bibi Stockholm will be used to house single male asylum seekers. It's part of the government's plan to reduce the cost of housing those seeking asylum. But residents are calling for the barge to be housed elsewhere. The Secretary for Energy Security and Net Zero, Grant Shapps, says the key priority is to control UK borders.
It's incredibly important that government has control over who comes to the country. Last night, we passed a milestone by finally defeating Labour, both in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, who have voted dozens and dozens of times against a bill designed to stop the small boats. We are trying to make sure that we can control our borders, and that is the difference between a Conservative government who want to control our borders and a Labour government who simply have no answer.
The Home Secretary says the risk of a terror attack in the UK is rising. Speaking in Westminster, Suella Braverman has identified Islamic terrorism as the primary UK domestic threat. Ms Braverman also confirmed Northern Ireland-related terrorism remains a significant threat, with some dissident groups continuing to carry out attacks. The Home Secretary also warned of Russia, Iran and China, referring to Russia as the most pressing national security concern.
Terrorist attacks are becoming increasingly unpredictable, making them harder to detect and investigate. Today, unlike in previous years, terrorist movements are increasingly fragmented and disparate, and there are emerging threats from the extreme right and from abroad. Despite the prevalence of lower sophistication attacks in the UK, the threat today is more diverse, dynamic and complex. Consequently, we judge that the risk from terrorism is rising.
Former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs says he's relieved at being cleared of domestic violence allegations after the charges were dropped. The 49-year-old was due to stand trial for a second time, accused of controlling or coercive behaviour towards his ex-girlfriend between 2017 and 2020, but lawyers withdrew the prosecution earlier today. He denies the offences, and the previous trial ended last August when the jury failed to reach any verdicts. A US national has crossed the inter-Korean border and is being held in the north, according to the UN. The person is a US soldier, according to two US officials. The US national was taking part in a tour of the joint security area when they crossed the military demarcation line separating South and North Korea into the north. Countries in Europe continue to sweat through extreme heat waves. British holiday destinations like Spain, Italy, Greece and parts of the Balkans are being hit with extreme heat. And forest fires have been occurring in many parts of Europe as they struggle with the hot weather. Planes and helicopters are being used in an attempt to fight a wildfire near Athens in Greece. The Greek Prime Minister is cutting short his trip to Brussels due to the ongoing fires. A solution to the 2026 Commonwealth Games being held in Australia can be found, and the idea of the UK hosting the Games is premature, that's according to Number 10. This comes after the Victorian state governments decided to withdraw as host of the Games. The reason for the Australian state's withdrawal, financial reasons. It would cost them more than £3 billion, which is 50% more than expected. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, Patrick, it's back to you.
As ever, there's a huge amount on the agenda today, but I'm going in with this. Our politicians are addicted to cheap foreign labour. They are absolutely addicted to it. They are pumping it into this nation's veins like a Class A drug, and it's British workers who get sick of it. Visa rules for bricklayers and masons, roofers, roof tilers and slaters, carpenters, joiners and plasterers are to be eased. They say it's to cope with labour shortages. Well, firstly, we had net migration of around 606,000 last year, so what jobs are all those people doing? Then people wheel out the old trope, don't they, of British workers are too lazy. They don't want to do those jobs. I think that's rubbish. These rules, making it easier for people to come here and work in manual labour jobs, mean that employers can pay them just 80% of going market rate. In some cases, for people like senior care workers, employers can pay them just £14,880 a year. It's £15,120 for lab technicians. So the reality is that British workers aren't lazy. They just don't want to work for an absolute pittance, which, when you look at some of the salaries there, I think in that context, that is absolutely fair enough. And employers can save themselves 20% of their wage bill by getting someone from abroad to do the job. So there is no incentive to train or employ British workers. But I think there's something more sinister going on here. And I think that our former Chancellor Philip Hammond let the cat out of the bag a few weeks ago when he said that one way to bring down inflation is to allow more low-skilled immigration. Well, just 15 days ago, on the 3rd of July, a group of Tory MPs came up with a load of policies to reduce net migration, and they said that public trust would be shattered if the government didn't do it. Well, 15 days later, we're easing visa restrictions. It's the opposite, isn't it? Now, number 10 denied that the move contradicted government attempts to cut immigration. But how can that be true? It can't, can it? Just look at this now, OK? So look at what I've got in my hand. It's a phone, OK? You can all see that. OK. I am not holding a phone. I am not holding a phone. I am not holding a phone. Do you believe me? Even though you can see it happening? No, of course you don't. But unfortunately, people suffering from addiction will lie, lie and lie again to get what they want. And our government is addicted to cheap foreign labour, undercutting British workers and using that as a tool to bring down inflation. Well, I want to hear from you on this. gbviews@gbnews.com. Tom Harwood joins me now, our deputy political editor. Tom, realistically, why are we doing this?
The government believes that there are labour shortages, particularly in the areas of construction. You listed some of those jobs that are being put onto these skills shortage occupation lists. It's interesting: bricklayers, masons, roofers, roof tilers, slaters, carpenters, joiners, plasterers. It's all construction. It's all to do with building things. And the government believes that there aren't enough people currently trained in the United Kingdom to fill what may well be the demand. Of course, we're not building the number of homes that the government wants to build every year. We're not building infrastructure fast enough. Ostensibly, that's the reason why they want to lower that threshold, bring those jobs into the shortage occupation list. But what they say at the same time is that this is a temporary measure. That's how they're describing it, because they do, in their words, want to train more Brits to do these things. But as things stand right now, they would say, we don't have people who are trained in large enough numbers.
But we're never going to if we keep incentivising employers to employ cheap foreign labour.
That's a legitimate criticism, and of course there are lots of questions that can be levelled at government in terms of, sure, there's funding for apprenticeships and all the rest of it, and that's what they would argue is the way to do this, but ultimately where is the incentive for British companies to then hire more British people? Although there is a strong argument as well, in an inflationary environment, the costs of these things have all gone up. What Philip Hammond said isn't technically untrue.
No, it's not untrue. It's just the fact that it flies in the face of this idea you wanted to reduce net migration to the tens of thousands or whatever it was. I mean, it is accurate. That is a way of bringing down inflation. It's just many people would argue it's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah, no, that's completely right. But it is interesting also looking at that 606,000 number of net migration last year. Most people who came didn't come to work. So 150,000 Ukrainians came along. Most of them are not in jobs. 200,000 students, they came to study, not in jobs again. The number who came specifically on work visas was only a little over 100,000. So perhaps that number being broken down a little bit is a bit different there. But ultimately what the government would say about this particular relaxation, their top line, is it's temporary.
Good stuff. Tom Harwood, our Deputy Political Editor, thank you very, very much. Well, I am joined now by the Conservative MP Marco Longhi. Marco, thank you very much for entering the fray. Are you on a little bit of a sticky wicket here, whereby either Brexit has failed and we now have a labour shortage, or your party has no intention of bringing down net migration?
Sorry, Patrick, could you repeat the question? I think I lost you just when you asked it.
That's all right. So are you on a little bit of a sticky wicket here in the sense that it could be argued that Brexit has failed and therefore we have a labour shortage, or the government has no intention of bringing down net migration? What would your views on that be?
Well, I think the whole point of Brexit was in order to reshape our economy and wean the whole economy off this cheap alternative, which is to import cheap labour. And, you know, we've always argued how the country has had very low productivity rates. Well, guess what? If we don't invest in training and in skills for the future and actually pay these jobs a better wage, then British people aren't going to be applying for them. And then naturally, business will start shouting and saying, oh, we haven't got enough people here. And government's response is to carry on bringing people in. We are on a vicious circle that needs to be broken. Brexit gave us that opportunity, and that's what we should be doing. And by the way, I profoundly disagree with Philip Hammond because I don't think he is telling the whole picture here. Because if you bring in so many extra people into the country, that in and of itself has inflationary pressures because it's greater demand on services, greater demand on products, greater demand on energy. And when you keep putting greater demand, it's that whole equation, demand and supply, prices stay higher. So I don't agree that it's purely deflationary to bring people in.
Well, also in terms of the housing crisis, I mean, they say, oh, we need to bring a load of people in to build all the houses because of the housing crisis, but then those people have to live somewhere, and that seems rather self-defeating, if you ask me. How would you respond to people who say British workers are lazy, they don't want to do these jobs?
I disagree with them. I mean, of course, we do have several people on our welfare system that should be encouraged to break that cycle they're in at the moment, which is to stay on welfare. And of course, these people should be offered more incentives to join the world of work. Many of these come from areas where for generation and after generation, they have not been offered the...
Oh, we might have lost Marco there. But I will try and get him back. I'm sure he will pop back up in just a second. But yes, so I think Marco is actually back with us. Good stuff. Yes, I didn't have to do my Marco Polo game there. Marco, good stuff. So you were just saying, yes, about inflationary pressures, but also that British workers aren't lazy.
They are not lazy. No, they are not lazy. We need to offer better training, better pay, and these people will be coming out to work. But we also need to make sure that we incentivize people who are not in education, training and employment to actually come out and work as well.
Yeah, and I think this will be a devastating blow to a lot of working class Brits who might be looking to work in that sector where it's, you know, low to medium pay, who are thinking, well, maybe I voted Conservative. You know, I'm a working class Tory. I voted Conservative at the last general election. I wanted people to stand up for British workers' rights. I couldn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I didn't want to vote Labour. I wanted to vote for good, patriotic Conservatives. And then they see that someone coming in, not even from the European Union now, but parts of Africa or India, say, to come and deliberately undercut their jobs. And that, I imagine, is a massive slap in the face.
Of course it's a slap in the face. And what migration has done has kept wages artificially low. So why would you want to join something that's going to pay you lower rates? I have the benefit of having travelled far and wide, and I can tell you that if you wanted to employ a plumber, a builder, an engineer of sorts, these are really well-respected areas of work, and they are paid more than they are paid here in the United Kingdom. So all we are constantly doing is going to areas where wages are currently lower and where the welfare state isn't as good. We import that cheap labour, and then what do? Is we don't keep to our manifesto promises in doing so by using spurious arguments around inflation. This is the wrong thing to do. We need to invest in technology, in skills, in training, make sure that employers come forward. We need to also look at what our universities are producing as well, because we've had that whole debate recently, which I do welcome the Prime Minister coming forward with, which is that universities producing students with degrees that are absolutely worthless. So they come out of education with this expectation of work that doesn't exist, and they've not had the opportunity, in other words, get their hands dirty, experience what real life is all about as a stepping stone perhaps to something else.
Yeah, and look, I agree with a huge amount of what you've just said there. No doubt a lot of our viewers and listeners will. But you are, unfortunately, Marco, in the position where your party is in power and has actually been in power for a heck of a long time now, which, therefore, in a way, unfortunately, makes everything your fault. So why have we now not got a situation where British employers have got any incentive whatsoever? As far as I can see, British employers have no incentive at all to train British and pay them well. We can't keep saying that that's our ambition, but then enacting policies that completely undercut that.
OK, so I did miss a big chunk of what you said because my screen has been freezing, and I apologise for that if it's my fault. I know you and I agree on pretty much everything here, Patrick. You're right. Employers do have this incentive to shop overseas. It's something that we need to move away from. We need to look at the apprenticeship levy. I fundamentally am a massive supporter of apprenticeships, but I don't think it's working as well as it should.
OK. Look, you know what? We've tried with Marco. We will leave it there. But, Marco, thank you very, very much. It's Marco Longhi there, the Conservative MP. I think we got a heck of a lot out of that, to be perfectly honest with you. But, unfortunately, really, there's not really too much of a way around the idea that it's all very well and good saying, look, we want to reduce net migration to this amount, and then consistently not doing that and setting record after record after record. It's all very well and good saying, look, we want to incentivise British employers and British companies to employ British. We want people to get apprenticeships. But then, simultaneously, enacting a policy that allows them to pay somebody 20% less if they come over here. They can also pay for their visa application for them, which is going down in value. And in some cases, you can invite people in to fill jobs the way you can pay them as little as around £14,500 a year. I would also politely suggest that if somebody is trying to come and live in this country on their own in £14,500 a year, and we know that a lot of people are actively trying to come to London, so not necessarily move to places, you know, up north like Bury, etc. Well, how are you going to live on that? Does the state then have to pay for that as well? So what is the net benefit to the British taxpayer? I can't help but feel as though we are just being lied to. All of this rhetoric about we want to bring everything down, we want to try and bring everything down, we want to back British workers. We have had a golden opportunity to do that since we voted for Brexit, and you have to hold your hands up and say, frankly, the opposite is happening. And what about the startling lack of creativity? Startling lack of creativity. Is there only one solution to anything, and that is more migration? GBviews at gbnews.com, get them coming in. But loads more on this on our website. Go to gbnews.com. It is the fastest growing national news site in the country. It's got all the best analysis, big opinion, and, of course, the latest breaking news. And if breaking news happens, it tends to happen in this time slot. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. But we're also running a campaign, aren't we? And it's going rather well to stop the UK becoming a cashless society. The campaign is called Don't Kill Cash, and it's proving to be hugely popular. Where are we up to now? 223,000 people have signed it. Good stuff. The petition is on our website, gbnews.com/cash. Help GB News with our campaign and tell the authorities don't kill our cash. Now, senior BBC bosses are facing questions as we speak, so that grilling is ongoing. It's an ongoing grilling on how the corporation handled the allegations against Hugh Edwards. We'll be checking in on that shortly. I'm also going to be talking about big local opposition to a ginormous new mosque that is going to be popping up by a big London landmark, so it's all to play for there. And, of course, we will keep up to speed with the Bibby Stockholm, which now is very much in Portland. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and this is Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
In just a few moments, I will cross live to Portland, where locals are very angry after the migrant barge that will house 500 men finally arrived. And that ties into a topic I'm going to be discussing a bit later on as well. Where are all the women and children crossing the channel? What are the numbers when it comes down to the age and, of course, as well, gender representation of people making that journey across the busiest shipping lane in the world? The emails are flooding in thick and fast at the moment. They're from John, for example, talking about the potential relaxation of visa rules and regs for lower-skilled foreign labour. He says, look, people come here, they work for less, and then out of our taxes we can end up paying their rent and housing benefits, etc. That's John's view. David also has been in touch to say some people think that immigration is too large, yet they then relax the rules. It does not compute. He says it's a crock of, it's a family show. OK, it's a family show. But I take your point, and I'm sure everybody else does as well. GBviews at gbnews.com. But the fallout from the Hugh Edwards scandal continues. The BBC's Director General Tim Davie is among a number of senior officials being questioned by MPs today. And to give us the lowdown on all of this, I am joined in the studio by GB News' national reporter, Paul Hawkins. Paul, what's the latest?
So this is the Lords Communications Committee with the Director General Tim Davie, the Acting Chair Dame Ellen Kloss-Stevens, and the the Director of Policy, Claire Sumner. At the moment, they're still being questioned by a group of 13 peers, including Lord Tony Hall, who used to be the Director General of the BBC. This was always scheduled, this meeting, as part about the BBC's future, BBC's funding, BBC's challenges, governance. But top of the list, they started with the scandal that surrounded the BBC and Hugh Edwards, which we know about. We've learned this afternoon, according to the Director General, the BBC has been in contact with the complainant in the Hugh Edwards case, but the Director General said he can only go so far in discussing details due to concerns about privacy. And he also had this update on the ongoing investigation and where they're at with that areas.
In the process of looking at those facts, and I would say we're keen to receive any information because we just want to understand anything that's out there. It's difficult to give you a precise time on that. The reason is because you have to go through that diligently, assess the information. There's also duty of care concerns within that. So on that one specifically, because I'm not in control of all the variables, that could take weeks or it could take a couple of months depending on, or even longer depending on what we get and managing the individuals involved flawlessly. And my main priority is to be fair, make sure we get all the information into that process and act judiciously.
Yeah, so he's basically saying, well, look, we're going to have to wait and see, essentially.
Yeah, so the investigation hasn't started yet. They're in the stages of trying to work out the terms of reference. So he said the chief operating officer at the BBC will take charge of it, along with a Deloitte senior partner, Simon Querdon, who has what he called extensive experience in this field. The full terms of reference will be put to the board on Thursday. They'll then publish it, and then an inquiry will get underway as soon as possible. But he's been clear this afternoon that it could take months or possibly longer before there's an outcome and before we know the full facts, which, of course, we don't know about the allegations at the centre of this case. And what we haven't heard from so far, and they may return to talking about this case, but at the moment they're talking about funding for the BBC, licence fee settlement, future, etc. There's still ongoing, that questioning in the House of Lords. But what we haven't heard so far is he hasn't been asked about whether the Sun have been cooperating with the BBC as part of this investigation, as it said it would, because, of course, the Sun has always said, yeah, we haven't published any evidence, but we do have evidence that backs up what the parents of the young person have said.
No, exactly that. Let's just check in a little bit, because this is still ongoing. So I believe that we might be able to just show you what's taking place right now at this particular...
We have a universal...
So this kind of grilling, if you want to call it that, is still ongoing. But as you were alluding to there, Paul, it has made the old licence fee issue kind of rear its head a bit again. BBC faces licence fee review as it blames increased competition for 500k slump after Brits snub levy. This is on our website at the moment, so you can read in more detail about that, GBNews.com. It does have the feeling like, well, I mean, the BBC is under quite a bit of pressure at the moment.
Yeah, it is under pressure. In the run-up to the negotiations over a new licence fee settlement, often they talk about, and there are multiple reports, that alternatives are being looked at, will be discussed at, that we're open to other forms of funding. So it's naturally part of the build-up to all the negotiations surrounding a renewal of the licence fee. So we shouldn't be expected about that. And the BBC, Tim Davie, the Director General, has been open in talking about, alternative forms of funding, that it has to be considered. Not saying he would go with it, but essentially what the BBC is still about, and about being impartial and about sticking to truth and not being open to too many commercial forces, means that it is able to take more creative risks as well. So, this is all part of that discussion, absolutely.
It is. Paul, look, thank you very, very much. Paul Hawkins there, our national reporter. So essentially it's going to be a bit of a wait-and-see moment for how the BBC exactly handle the Hugh Edwards investigation. I don't know, I wonder whether or not people are trying to juggle the sensitivities of that particular issue at the moment, and given the statement released by Hugh Edwards' wife as well in regard to his mental state. But also as well, I think the very, very legitimate public interest and the idea that people don't want this thing rumbling on and being kicked into the long grass before there are answers to what are, let's be honest, some very, very serious questions. GBViews and GBnews.com is that email address. Loads on between now and 4 o'clock. In just a couple of minutes, I will take you live to Portland. Locals are protesting the Bibby Stockholm migrant barge after it arrived. I'll be talking about all of that. I'll also be talking about opposition to a massive mosque opening up, supposedly anyway, in London, right in the heart of London, in a bustling tourist area, in a bustling kind of LGBTQ plus region of the city as well. I mean, I can't see any problems happening there. I don't know about you, but right now it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories. The BBC's Director General has told the House of Lords Communications and Digital Committee that staff at the corporation are confident in the broadcaster's whistleblowing process. Tim Davie confirmed the organisation has been in touch with the complainant, who alleged Hugh Edwards paid a young person for explicit images since the allegations were published in The Sun. The Home Office says the first asylum seekers will be moved to the Bibby Stockholm migrant barge next week. The barge will be used to house single male asylum seekers. Portland residents are protesting and calling for the barge to be housed elsewhere. And the Home Secretary says the risk of a terror attack in the UK is rising. Suella Braverman has identified Islamic terrorism as the primary UK domestic threat. She also confirmed Northern Ireland-related terrorism remains a significant threat, with some dissident groups continuing to carry out attacks. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3079 and €1.1648. The price of gold is £1,510 and 13 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,435 points.
Sorry.
Look at the weather.
The temperature's rising.
I was like, oh! And then I thought, hold on, you're only thrown to the weather. Yeah, like, if you can't do that. Can you imagine?
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain for many of us at the moment and through the rest of the day. Showers for some, and in one or two spots it is dry and bright. But the rain or showers do ease later. As this little weather feature moves through, it's going to push into the North Sea by the end of the day, peeling away the rain from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and central England. Still some showery bursts for northern and eastern England for a time, and also some showers arriving into the north and northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, but clear spells elsewhere. However, a bit more cloud around and slightly milder air with us, so a less cool night, 15-16 in the south. I think single figures still, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be first thing on Wednesday morning. And also there'll be some sunny spells for Wales, southwest England, a lot of cloud elsewhere. And the early rainfall in the east turns to showers. Widely, actually, we'll see an afternoon of sunny spells and showers. But in between the showers, there will be some warmth in the sun. 23 Celsius in the south, 18 to 20 in the north. The showers heaviest in the east. Thursday sees a return to sunny spells and showers for many, but I think a better chance of drier and brighter interludes at times. Likewise, Friday, a day of sunny spells and showers before some more persistent rain arrives from the northwest later, and that will be with us this weekend.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Sadly, finally arrived. The migrant barge that will house 500 male asylum seekers has arrived in Dorset. A number of locals have been protesting at Portland Harbour today. The first asylum seekers are expected to board the Bibby Stockholm later this month. So, without further dither and delay, let's cross live now to Portland. Speak to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Yes, Mark, so strong local opposition. We knew that was going to happen, but the barge is there now, and that's that.
Yes, it is. It's here now and is likely to be here for the foreseeable future, I think, sadly, according to many of the locals we've spoken to. I've got some breaking news to share with you that I think puts this whole issue into context. This from our Kent producer, who has counted 9 small boats that have crossed the English Channel today. That's 450 at least people who have crossed the English Channel in small boats just today, a break in the weather that allowed this surge in small boats to come across. Let's take a look down here now, Patrick. This is the BB Stockholm accommodation. House 500, so almost the number that have crossed the English Channel so far today would take up the accommodation in this particular barge. That gives you an indication, I think, of the scale of this crisis that continues. The government is trying to take action. It's trying to look at these as an option to get away from hotel accommodation for those that are coming across. They're doing deals with the French in the hope of trying to be more robust in the policing of French beaches. They, of course, are still struggling to get agreement, and the Supreme Court eventually, they hope, to agree that the Rwanda policy is lawful, and all the while people are still coming across the English Channel. Remember, just over a month ago, Rishi Sunak stood up just down the coast in Dover telling us that the small boats policy of his government was working, that it had led to a 20% fall in the numbers crossing the English Channel. That was true maybe a month ago, but it was all down to the weather. With improvements in the weather, we are fast approaching 14,000 people now who have crossed the English Channel, and that is the same number at this period last year. So that gives you an indication of what we're up against, because the extra 14,000 this year is on top of the 40,000 last year, on top of the 28,000 the year before. People that are still in the system and being accommodated, increasingly in the future, barges like this perhaps, or air bases, but they still require to be accommodated, and they land in ever larger numbers, Patrick. An indication, I think, just sharing that breaking news with you about the situation in the English Channel today gives you some clarity as to what the job in hand is to try to deal with this crisis.
Yeah, I mean, it is perfectly reasonable to suggest that if the current rate of travel across the Channel continues, we will need to line up so many barges in order to accommodate these people that they could just walk across the Channel by skipping across their rooftops. But, Mark, the local opposition there today on their kind of D-Day, their local day of reckoning, the day that potentially their area may well change forever, what's that been like?
Well, I mean, it's been vociferous. There are those local people who are very concerned about the impact that it will have on the local economy, not just the local economy, but the locality here, the people, the population. 500 single young men who will be accommodated on this barge and who will be free to wander about in Portland and, of course, surrounding areas such as Weymouth. There is some real concern about that. In tandem with these protests, although on opposite sides, but both of them who are opposed to the barge, you have those human rights groups who claim that it is an infringement of the human rights of these asylum seekers to put them on accommodation like this. I think the government makes no apology for that. They say it's, you know, basic, austere accommodation, but it's safe, and they get fed, and they get a place to rest their head, and they're secure. But they want it also to act as a deterrent, so that people that are coming across here, Patrick, will find that at the end of the day, they might not be going into a hotel. They might find themselves in a barge like this or on an airbase. But in doing that, of course, it does also bring with it fierce local condemnation and concern, because you may have 100, 150 in a hotel in a community somewhere, but when you're talking about 500, or with regard to the air bases, 1,700 or 2,000 even up at Scampton in smaller communities, you can understand why people in those communities would be very concerned about the impact on their local neighbourhoods.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the gender of these people as well, predominantly young men. Mark White, thank you very much, our Home and Security Editor from the scene there. Lots to go out there. Firstly, that barge has been absolutely A-OK for every single other person who's ever had to stay on it, which includes other asylum seekers and migrants. It includes workers. It has just had a refit. They are basically free to come and go. They will be strongly encouraged to return to that barge at around 11 o'clock at night, which, let's be honest, if you think you might be about to be booted out of the country, you're not going to do, are you? So there is that issue. I have got some stats here, and this ties into a conversation I'm going to be having later on in the show, which is, where are all the women and children? Where are they? Where are all those people who are supposed to be most in need of asylum and refuge? When I look at the numbers here, 95% of all Albanian small boats crossings turned out to be men. 87% of small boats arrivals in 2022 were men, and the majority of them were aged between 18 to 39. It is a bit like an 18 to 30 cruise, isn't it? Just across the Channel and into Britain forever. But I'm going to speak now to Alex Bailey, who's the organiser of the No to the Barge group. Alex, thank you very much. Another question I'm very keen to ask you is, when we see some of those people there with the Refugees Welcome banners, just out of interest, do they live in your area?
So first of all, I just want to say good to see you again, Patrick, and thank you very much for Mark White and Jeff Moody for their continued support so far, both on the ground and you guys in the studio. So, are they from this area? Often, no, they're not, unfortunately. Yeah, today we had a lot of people from Portland itself who came out to support us, but from this other group who were, I'd say, quite testy, and there were moments there, no.
So, realistically, the major opposition to you guys protesting about or voicing your concerns about having a barge in your area is coming from people who are bussed in, who don't live there, who get quite aggy and then leave.
Yes, they left and they actually vandalised several of the bridges in the area and some other structures that were there. It was quite unfortunate altogether.
So actual criminal damage as well, which shows, I think, exactly how much they really do care about your local area. Fascinating times we live in, Alex, isn't it? Fascinating times. But anyway, back to the matter in hand. How do you feel? Because, look, this is a day that I think you knew was coming, but probably dreaded.
That is true, Patrick. We knew it was coming. Gladly, the weather was such, so a month of respite, as it were. And but we had a really good turnout today. This was all about reclaiming the voices of the Portlanders that was taken by this Home Office, who, to be honest, they need to pull their sleeves up. They need to look at what they're doing wrong, whether that's funding, whether that's people power, because what they're doing is not enough.
OK, yeah, exactly. And it will be people in the local area like yourselves who will end up bearing down the brunt of this. How do you feel about the supposedly hourly bus service that's going to be taking some of those people from the barge around the local area so they can do things like go shopping at the taxpayers' expense?
Quite frankly, again, this is a disparity between the people of Portland and Weymouth. We're aware of the GP situation too. And there seemingly is this endless money tree that is being made available. And it's just really not fair, Patrick.
No, OK, all right. And I suppose what happens now for you guys? Do you just continue to voice your disappointment? Are you going to be there every single day protesting? What's going to happen?
So a couple of avenues have come to mind. We're going to be looking at the legal avenue, which is we're going to be finding assistance from a barrister with maritime and planning permission experience there, just to help us. And we do have a request for that. We're also going to be protesting when the cruise liners come in, just to show the disparity there between these wealthy people who are able to afford to go on cruise liners and these poor people, the asylum seekers, on the barge itself. We also have an idea to go to the Langham Wine Estate too and have a conversation there with the owners of the Portland Port.
Well, that is fascinating, and I look forward to however that does play out. Alex, thank you very, very much. Alex Bailey there is the organiser of the No to the Barge group. Isn't it really, really insightful when you see people turning up, saying refugees welcome? It is a perfect little microcosm of reality, isn't it? People saying, oh, look, come on, we've got room for absolutely everybody. Oh, do you live in this area where this barge is going to be? Well, no, we don't live here. Right, so it's not going to affect you, is it? No, it's not at all. OK, all right. It's a little bit like the Gary Linekers of this world, isn't it? It doesn't really affect them. The kids all go to private school, they don't have the nice private GPs, etc. Not at the coalface. But, moving on. Snow White's 7 Dwarfs, this is a shift in tone, have been cancelled. Disney has replaced them in a new film with 7 magical creatures. I will be telling you why this is much more important than it sounds very shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening.
from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, at 4 p.m, I will discuss the news that working visa rules are being relaxed to tackle the lack, apparently, of carpenters, bricklayers, roofers, etc. in this country. I will be asking, having a big discussion on this, are Brits lazy? Loads of emails on that so far. We'll go to them shortly. Thank you very much. Keep them coming. gbviews@gbnews.com. But now, Snow White's 7 dwarfs have been given short shrift by Disney. They've been replaced by what are being called 7 magical creatures in a film that will be released next year. And these magical creatures, well, frankly, are not really dwarves, are they? With me now is the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge. Paul, thank you very, very much. Some people are saying that this really is just a marker of, unfortunately, a marginalised group getting less work to make way for, other people, essentially.
And they would be right to say that, absolutely, yes. Walt Disney will be spinning in his cryogenic chamber at this point. These attempts at inclusivity actually, as you've just made clear, exclude. There aren't any dwarves in this production. And yeah, actually, if you go back to the original Brothers Grimm story, it is called Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. I checked this before I came on, just seeing if this was some sort of aberration in 1931 when there was a particular insensitivity. It is Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. It's actually a part of the historical canon of fairy tales, and it's being misrepresented deliberately. The good news is, and there is actually some good news, the inclusivity executives at Disney, Netflix and Warner Brothers have all exited those companies in the last 6 weeks. Bob Iger has come back to Disney in November last year. This production actually predated this. And so there was a CEO at Disney that was almost solely responsible for turning it woke. And so these people have actually all left the building now, and they're left with some of these productions that are getting these headlines, and they're not being particularly protected by Disney. So I think that the signs are good for the future, that major corporations have got the message that they can't keep tinkering with these productions in a sort of propaganda kind of way.
Yeah, no, exactly. But some of these magical creatures, I mean, it basically might as well just be called Snow White and the Seven Politically Correct Companions, mightn't it? Because we have at least 3 people there who appear to be black. There's an individual there as well who looks to me to be Hispanic. We do, to be fair, have one dwarf. So that person has made the cut, which is good. Sorry about his 6 mates who've had to make way. And we just have a couple of other people, frankly, who just look homeless. So maybe that is the niche that they are going for there. But I do find it bizarre that, yes, in order to try to be more inclusive, they are now actually desperately trying to get rid of people who are marginalised as it currently stands anyway.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is where the left fall over themselves, making these kind of policies. And we've had so many, I mean, in the United States, we've had so many examples of this, attempting to be inclusive. Like there's been sort of company mascots taken off the cover of cereal packets, etc., because they're deemed to be racist. And the only people that are actually left on the cereal packets now are white. So look, it never fails to be entertaining. But there is a very real point at this. There is this inverse prejudice, if you like. It's like you're actually being excluded because you're a dwarf. I mean, this is the absurdity.
Story. So it's called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which apparently is supposed to have been around some kind of like fair German maiden. Well, the lady who's going to play Snow White is Hispanic, and there aren't 7 dwarfs. So it's just a different story.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up. Rachel Zegler, who's actually playing Snow White, she's a brilliant actress, and she was a brilliant actress in West Side Story. And she was cast in West Side Story because the original casting of the original movie before the Spielberg reboot, there's no E in my name, Duddridge, before the reboot was played by Natalie Wood, and that was deemed to be, okay, look, if we ever remake this, let's have a Latina actress in. And they did. Rachel Zegler was fantastic as Maria in the Spielberg reboot of West Side Story. Yeah. So it seems reasonable that she quite rightly has benefited from culturally sensitive casting. This is called Snow White. The opening lines of the story is, I want my daughter to have skin as white as snow and lips as red as blood. That was the whole point.
Yeah, indeed, and it has just completely changed. Paul Duddridge without an E, thank you very much, as ever, of the Politics People podcast, joining us from stateside. Now, a reminder of that news that broke a few minutes ago. At least 450 migrants across the Channel in small boats today, bearing in mind that the Bibby Stockholm houses 500. Go figure. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain for many of us at the moment and through the rest of the day. Showers for some, and in 1 or 2 spots it is dry and bright. But the rain or showers do ease later as this little weather feature moves through. It's going to push into the North Sea by the end of the day, peeling away the rain from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and central England. Still some showery bursts for northern and eastern England for a time, and also some showers arriving into the north and northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, but clear spells elsewhere. However, a bit more cloud around and slightly milder air with us, so a less cool night, 15-16 in the south. I think single figures still, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be first thing on Wednesday morning. And also there'll be some sunny spells for Wales, southwest England, a lot of cloud elsewhere. And the early rainfall in the east turns to showers. Widely, actually, we'll see an afternoon of sunny spells and showers. But in between the showers, there will be some warmth in the sun. 23 Celsius in the south, 18 to 20 in the north. The showers heaviest in the east. Thursday sees a return to sunny spells and showers for many, but I think a better chance of drier and brighter interludes at times. Likewise, Friday, a day of sunny spells and showers before some more persistent rain arrives from the northwest later, and that will be with us this weekend.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Are Brits lazy? That's what I want to know. Why do we keep having to recruit cheap foreign labour? Is it actually, if you're being honest, because you don't want to work in that job for that amount of money? Or is that deeply offensive and our government is letting people wander in and undercut the British working class? In other news, there is massive backlash now to a huge mosque that is going to be constructed in central London. What do you make of all of this? Do you think that it's actually fair enough? Is this just the way the demographics of the country are going? Or actually, is it a little bit offensive to some people who actually live there? In other news, we're going to be talking about this as well. Yes, that breaking news that Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, brought you just moments ago. 450 people, at least, have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far today. Bear in mind that the Bibby Stockholm, which has just arrived in Portland, houses 500. So, you know, go figure. Similar vein, though, this was actually a big win for the government last night when it comes to its illegal migration bill. The laws back down. Have that, Archbishop Justin Welby. You know, just beg the question why on earth he put up such a fight to begin with. But there we go. What happens now, though? What does this really mean? That's what I want to know. Have we got anything else as well? Yes, we do. Of course we do. There's always one more. The BBC are currently being grilled, so we will find out the latest on the old Hugh Edwards saga. Patrick Christys, GB News. Loads on. OK, gbviews@gbnews.com is that email address. I want your reaction to that huge mosque that's being built at a central London landmark. It is near a big LGBTQ+ area as well. So, you know, can anyone else see a couple of issues rearing its head there? So, yeah, get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. But now it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. The BBC's Director General has been telling a parliamentary committee today that staff at the corporation are confident in the broadcaster's whistleblowing process. The House of Lords Communications and Digital Committee asked Tim Davie why the organisation hadn't taken allegations against its most highly paid news presenter more seriously and sooner. The BBC boss confirmed that the organisation has been in touch with the complainant who alleged Hugh Edwards paid a young person for explicit images since the allegations were published in The Sun. Tim Davie says the investigation could take a while to reach a conclusion.
It's difficult to give you a precise time on that. The reason is because you have to go through that diligently, assess the information. There's also duty of care concerns within that. So on that one specifically, because I'm not in control of all the variables, that could take weeks or it could take a couple of months depending on, or even longer depending on what we get and managing the individuals involved flawlessly. And my main priority is to be fair, make sure we get all the information into that process and act judiciously.
Tim Davie speaking earlier on today. Well, GB News understands 450 people have crossed the English Channel in 9 small boats this morning. The news comes as the first group of asylum seekers will be moved to a migrant barge which is currently docked in Portland in Dorset next week. The Bibby Stockholm is going to be used to house single male asylum seekers as part of the government's plan to reduce the cost of housing migrants in hotels. Local residents are calling for the barge to be moved elsewhere and say that protesters at the scene are not even from the local area. The Secretary for Energy Security and Net Zero, Grant Shapps, says the key priority is to control the UK's borders.
It's incredibly important that government has control over who comes to the country. Last night, we passed a milestone by finally defeating Labour, both in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, who have voted dozens and dozens of times against a bill designed to stop the small boats. We are trying to make sure that we can control our borders, and that is the difference between a Conservative government who want to control our borders and a Labour government who simply have no answer.
The Home Secretary says the risk of a terror attack in the UK is on the rise. Speaking in Westminster, Suella Braverman has identified Islamist terrorism as the primary UK domestic threat. Ms Braverman also confirmed Northern Ireland-related terrorism remains a significant threat, with some dissident groups continuing to threaten attacks. The Home Secretary also warned of Russia, Iran and China, referring to Russia as the most pressing national security concern.
Terrorist attacks are becoming increasingly unpredictable, making them harder to detect and investigate. Today, unlike in previous years, terrorist movements are increasingly fragmented and disparate, and there are emerging threats from the extreme right and from abroad. Despite the prevalence of lower sophistication attacks in the UK, the threat today is more diverse, dynamic and complex. Consequently, we judge that the risk from terrorism is rising.
The former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs says he's relieved at being cleared of domestic violence allegations after charges against him were dropped. The 49-year-old was due to stand trial for a second time, accused of controlling or coercive behaviour towards his ex-girlfriend. But lawyers have withdrawn the prosecution. Ryan Giggs denies the offences, and his previous trial ended last August with the jury failing to reach a verdict. A US national has crossed the border from South to North Korea and is being held in the north, according to the United Nations. US officials say the individual is a member of the US military who is taking part in a tour of the joint security area and crossed the military demarcation line separating the two Koreas. Countries in Europe are continuing to swelter their way through an extreme summer heat wave. British holiday destinations like Spain, Italy, Greece and even parts of the Balkans are being hit with very high temperatures. And forest fires continue to blaze in many parts of Europe, with firefighting planes and helicopters being used to fight wildfires near Athens in Greece. The Greek Prime Minister has cut short his trip to Brussels to oversee government activities as the fires rage. Now, a solution to the 2026 Commonwealth Games being held in Australia, which has refused to host it now, can be found, and the idea of the UK hosting the Games instead is premature, according to Downing Street. The state of Victoria decided to withdraw as host of the 2026 Games because it was too expensive, costing more than £3 billion, 3 times more than it originally expected. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Well, we start with that news that thousands of foreign construction workers are set to move to Britain after the government relaxed visa restrictions. So carpenters, bricklayers and roofers are among those who will be allowed to apply for work visas and get a discount on fees in a bid to fill UK job shortages. But bear in mind that net migration last year was 606,000, so we're not really short of people, but we do still need to bring in skilled workers from abroad. So I wanted to know, is it that Brits are just lazy? I'm going to be having a discussion on this very shortly, but for more of the facts on all of this is Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood. Tom, the facts about cheap foreign labour, please.
Well, a shortage occupation list is a deliberate government policy to bring in individuals who might not meet all of the criteria of our new points-based system for immigration. And the way that our post-Brexit immigration system works is that there's a relatively high salary threshold and English-speaking requirements that are needed for people to come into this country. However, for the shortage occupation lists, these are areas where the government thinks that we frankly don't have enough people in the country who are trained to do this stuff or who want to do this stuff, then the salary threshold is massively reduced to 80% of the average for the salary of that particular industry, rather than an
So employers can now legally pay people 20% less, essentially, than they would a Brit.
Well, they can legally pay any... This isn't about 20% less than the minimum wage. There's no legal restriction. This is just of the market rate, the average wages of the industry.
So if they advertise that job to a Brit at that salary, the Brit would probably go, that's 20% less than what the average wage is, I'm not taking that job.
Yes.
But somebody from, say, I don't know, Bulgaria might go, yes, that's loads of money.
Right, exactly. And that's where the government is trying to bring in more people specifically. And I think this gets to the heart of something. There was a lot of commentary a couple of months ago when the migration numbers came out, that when people said the government has lost control of migration, this isn't working, why is it... No, they haven't. They are making specific policy choices for more migration. Boris Johnson liberalised the number of students that can come to British universities. There were then 150,000 Hong Kongers, 150,000 Ukrainians. These were deliberate policy choices that the government has made. So often in the round, the government seems to be talking out of two sides of its mouth. It says, we want to bring down net migration. But then, when it comes to the specifics, it's like, do you want fewer nurses? Do you want fewer construction workers? Do you want fewer Ukrainians? And on each of those specific questions, the government would say no. So there you get these sort of two elements of government policy almost going at each other.
Yeah, and it really does look as though it might potentially be a deliberate attempt to bring down inflation. We've had Philip Hammond, our former Chancellor, Spreadsheet Phil, of course, most famous arguably for handing a cough sweet to Theresa May during one of the most infamously awful speeches at a Conservative Party conference before one of the most infamously awful tenures as Prime Minister that we've ever had. He was saying that one way to bring down inflation was to essentially keep wages artificially low and import as many foreign people as you possibly can. I am paraphrasing there, don't sue me, Spreadsheet Phil. But this is the thing that for a lot of people won't quite get their heads around, which is how on earth can we have so many people arriving into Britain every single year? 1.2 million people arrived.
Yes.
How can we still have... What jobs are they doing? What jobs are they doing?
Well, here's the interesting thing. A lot of them aren't doing jobs. So, for example, this was the first year that asylum seekers were included in that figure. There's a statutory ban on asylum seekers from working. In fact, they have to live at the taxpayer's expense. So that's a significant number within those hundreds of thousands. There's also Ukrainians who have come along who aren't in jobs, who are living in people's homes.
Yeah.
There's also 200,000 students who aren't in work. Actually, if you break down the number, and the net number is 606,000, the majority of that number aren't people who've come to work.
OK, good stuff. Well, on that, it's a fascinating discussion, and we're going to have a bit of a debate now, a bit of a further chat anyway, about whether or not Brits are lazy. Tom Harwood, our deputy political editor, I nearly promoted you there, Tom. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of time. But look, some of the emails have been coming in on this. I'm going to go into the inbox before we have our debate on this, because I was asking you whether or not you think that actually, hand on heart, if we're being completely honest about it, Brits are lazy and don't want to do some of the jobs for that amount of money. So, no, Brits are not lazy, but those who are in charge of them are. British workers work longer hours than on the continent and have fewer holidays, but are less efficient. There's no... Oh, yes, there is. Richard has been in touch on that one. Thank you very, very much. There's a lot of this coming in now. No, Brits are not work shy. They know that if they work at low-paid jobs, they will receive less money than if they claim benefits. And this is part of the problem, which is if I'm having a little look at the wage structure now, and I have got some details on this, some of the jobs, so not just the manual labour jobs, some of the jobs in the care sector, for example, you can now come to this country and take a job for 14.5 grand. Now, if you want to come to London and live off 14.5 grand, anywhere in the south, I would argue. I mean, let's be honest, 14.5 grand is still a real push up north, but you're not really going to be able to pay your own way in this country. So a lot of Brits, I think, in my personal view, before we have this chat, is that, no, they're not lazy. They just know their sense of self-worth, and they would expect a government, especially a loosely speaking, Brexit-backing, patriotic government, to try to create a situation where good, hard-working Brits don't have to be undercut by cheap foreign labour. But joining me to have a further chat about whether or not we're all a bit lazy is the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, it's Stephen Wolfe, and the vice president of the Federation of Master Builders, it's Chris Carr. Good stuff. I'll tell you what, I will start with you, Chris, if that's all right. As the vice president of the Federation of Master Builders, you will know more than most, I think, really. Are Brits a bit lazy? Are, in your industry, people having to employ people who are coming from abroad because, frankly, they will work harder and take the jobs that Brits won't? What's your view?
I'm not sure it's lazy. I think he's trying to get young people into the industry, and he's selling it to the parents. You know, you're trying to get into school children whose parents are all, you know, go to university, get a university career. But the best is to join the construction industry and get trained as they go along. It's not lazy. We just got to promote ourselves a bit better.
And I'll just stick with you before I go to Stephen, Chris, if that's all right, which it must be very, very appealing, I would have thought, to be able to look at a system like this now and say, well, I could really pay somebody on the continent or from Africa or from India or something 20% less than the average going rate for a Brit. Is that tempting, Chris?
No, I mean, I'm based in the north, and it's just getting people to work. It's not in the industry. It's not the case of getting them for cheap labour. That's not the point. You want the best quality labour you can get. And at the moment, we can't get British quality labour. Construction Industry Training Board's trying, and the FMB's trying, but we just can't get young people in or getting people to change careers.
OK, Stephen, I'll throw it over to you. How would you respond to people who do say that, look, you know, Brits are lazy, they're not willing to take these jobs, and if they're not willing to take it, then other people are going to do it for them? It's the same thing that's happened with people like fruit pickers, for example.
Well, we've had this unfortunate argument for nearly 20 years that I've been involved in looking at immigration. There are 2 points to this, Patrick. First of all, it is enormous snobbery for those who suggest that British workers are lazy and won't do the work for the wages. What I would say there is a very important point, and it's something that Chris has just mentioned there, is that they just don't like being taken advantage of having to work for low wages in what is really a high cost economy. And if we want to look at the facts, Patrick, some really key facts to show that British people are not lazy. Currently, there are 33 million people being employed in the UK. That's 76% of all those eligible to work. That's the highest that we've ever had in this country. Over 65s, 1.5 million people are working. Economic inactivity, this is the point that people say shows whether we're working or not, is it been on decline and consistent decline since 1971, and we're at the lowest levels. So we are facing in construction higher levels of people working. There's 1.2 million people in construction, and I'm sure your guest will talk about that. In agriculture, we're actually up in the number of people working in agriculture, up in the number of people working in food services. But this is to your point, Patrick, more than anything else. The vast majority of jobs in this country are in retail, health and food services. That's nearly 11 million people, and the average wages there are £20,000 a year.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I suppose the numbers do themselves. Chris, you alluded to something that I am big about here, which is about defeating this stigma, this ridiculous stigma of people who want to go and get a practical trade. Now, for a lot of people who are, frankly, dragged into school every single day, maths, physics, sciences, Shakespeare, is not for them, right? It's just not for them for whatever reason. And the stigma would be, oh, that makes you a bit thick. And that's not true at all. That's absolutely not true. There's a huge amount of intelligence that has to go into learning a practical trade. And do we not need to have some kind of paradigm shift here and make it seem like, well, frankly, there's nothing wrong with actually going and working with your hands for a living?
It's a big thing I've been pushing for a long time. We do seem to look at tradespeople as being below others. In Europe, they're very highly respected if you're a tradesperson. But one of the things, when we do train young people to get qualifications, they have to pass their maths and English to be able to get qualifications, which I think is an absolutely crazy idea. Because if we're bringing foreign workers in, I'm sure they won't have to pass their maths and English to work. But we're asking our young people, they've got to pass the maths and English. If they failed at school, the school system's laid them down. Don't put it onto the construction industry to retrain people to learn basic maths and English. That's not what we're there for. People are gifted with their hands. People love what we do. We live a legacy, and we need to be more encouraging those sort of people into the industry.
Stephen, by the time that the government has decided to lower the wage threshold for foreign workers and then make them pay less for a visa application, and then presumably in some cases find them somewhere to live and support their wider family as well, can't we just be subsidising more people like Chris so that they can employ more British people and train them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have got this all the way wrong. Chris has pointed out to a very clear point, which is about the inequalities and differences between employing a foreign worker compared to training those in the UK. We just have not done it because of the snobbery levels that are involved in training people. If you wanted to be really effective on this, first of all, I would remove all taxation for those in the lower wage industries, such as food services, such as those employed in the building industries like Chris. If you remove that, suddenly you've got a very, very big competitive advantage for someone saying, well, hang on a minute, I want to go and do a different job, but I'm not having to pay tax until, say, £40,000, for example. And that would be a massive fillip for some of those jobs where they're currently not finding enough people to work in. I would also straight away change the imbalance to a way that we look at those being employed in, say, the building and construction industry, which is what a lot of my family have done for most of their lives. And that is removing those inequalities that Chris has pointed out. There are very clear taxation, regulatory and training impetuses that we could do if we wanted to make the balance. And I certainly don't think that the drive for foreign workers is being caused by people like Chris. It's being driven by the companies like Amazon and the very major companies like Sainsbury's and Tesco's, who are looking for low-wage workers to come into this country.
No, indeed. And Chris, look, while I've got you, could you maybe just try to sell it to people who are maybe watching this at the moment and thinking, you know, I actually would quite like to get into the Federation of Master Builders? Go on, I'll give you the big sell.
Well, it's a great trade association, but that's not what I'm here for. Is really to promote the industry, and the industry, you know, my bricklayers won't get out of bed for less than £1,000 a week, and when you're talking about 20,000 a year, and I'm based up in Grimsby, you know, I'm based in a fairly low-cost area, and if you're on, you know, 52,000 a year, you can afford to live a good lifestyle. And it's a trade for life. And it's what we keep saying to the parents: we leave a legacy. We build something that's going to be there 100 years' time. There's no other industry that leaves that sort of legacy. If you want your children to be part of the legacy, part of the UK, then this is what they should be doing: encouraging them to join the construction industry as a tradesperson.
Absolutely, especially when we're slap bang in the middle of a housing crisis at the moment. Britain is primed and ready to go with the handbrake on to boom if we get things right and if our politicians pull their finger out. And I think we should be doing everything that we can to incentivise people, to mobilise them, to be a part of that. And like you said there, leave a wonderful legacy. Both of you, thank you very much, chaps. Always an absolute pleasure. That is, of course, the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and the Vice President of the Federation of Master Builders, Chris Carr, who I think gave it a fantastic, fabulous sell, actually. And a lot of parents out there, if they're saying, oh, I don't want my son to be a bricklayer, well, I'm sorry, but why not? 52 grand a year minimum sounds all right to me. GBviews at gbnews.com. But get a load of this. This has got you all going in the inbox. A Muslim billionaire is building a mosque that will accommodate almost 400 people right in the middle of London's West End. It has caused, needless to say, quite a lot of controversy. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But boom.
And action.
Sergeant read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, in just a few minutes' time, I will ask a Conservative MP for his view on the government's decision to relax those visa rules for construction workers. Some fascinating stuff coming in the inbox. I'll go to that about whether or not Brits are lazy, and some people getting in touch to give their personal insights, saying that their own son or daughter is trying to get an apprenticeship, etc. So that is fascinating. I'll talk about that shortly. I'll also ask whether the BBC licence fee could be ditched and replaced with a Netflix-style subscription or even advertising. That's in light of the ongoing fallout from the Hugh Edwards saga, but also the BBC grilling that appears to be taking place at the moment. But this is a story that's got a lot of you going. A huge mosque is about to be built in the middle of London's West End. So, Muslim billionaire Asif Aziz is going to build a 3-storey mosque inside the Trocadero. So, when it's finished, almost 400 people will be able to worship there. Now, this Malawian-born tycoon, so he owns this property portfolio, around £2 billion. This is according to reports, of course. Now, he bought the Trocadero itself for more than 220 million quid back in 2005, and is founding the mosque through his charitable organisations. It is interesting, though, because if you just do a cursory Google of this guy, no doubt he would deny this, but he is deemed, in many articles, to be a pretty harsh landlord, to say the least, threatening to bankrupt people who've got into rent arrears, especially during the lockdown, etc. Again, you know, no doubt he would dispute this and just say it's all business or whatever. But these are the kind of things that are coming out, which maybe doesn't quite chime with this good, overt, moralistic individual who wants to slap a mosque right in the middle of London's West End. So it got me thinking, though, is this really appropriate? So this is obviously a huge tourist area. It's an area full of theatre goers and people who want to come there. There's a huge LGBTQ plus representation. There are no shortages of mosques in London or indeed any major city in the UK as it currently stands. Do we really need to have a ginormous space there? And I wanted to know what you guys were thinking about this. gbviews@gbnews.com. Patrick, I'm surprised that this is happening. Why do you think it's happening? And this is from David. David alludes to the idea that potentially Sadiq Khan could well be looking to get another term as London Mayor. This will, of course, have had to have gone through a variety of different planning applications, etc., so I'm not 100% sure how much involvement Sadiq will have personally had in all of this. But, yeah, a lot of people say that this is an absolute outrage. It doesn't really chime in with the local area. Like I've said before, there are a huge amount of people, of course, around the area who would use it, but there are also mosques, you know, the Regent Park mosques, etc. I just wonder whether or not we're being trolled a little bit here as a country, whether or not this is actually kind of top trolling by some very wealthy elements of the British Muslim community. Here we are, right in an area that you could argue embodies traditional Western nightlife, you know, right there in Piccadilly, and we're going to have a ginormous mosque there that can house around 400 worshippers at any one time. Will it irreversibly change the area, though? And that, I think, for a lot of people is the issue. When you have a look around certain different parts of, say, Birmingham, Rusholme around Manchester, I mean, you could take your pick, Bradford, for example, have those areas been irreversibly changed by rapid proportions of Islamic involvement in those areas? Well, yeah, I suppose culturally they definitely have, and you see the kind of cultural and religious aspects of those areas change. Is that what's happening right now in London? Has it already happened as well? And actually, maybe if you're not bothered about it, you can get in touch as well, gbviews@gbnews.com. But a lot of people are saying this is actually, frankly, going to change that area irreversibly. And when you look at the cultural situation that we have, so loads of people going out on nights out and a lot of, you could argue, hedonism, does it really chime with that? Is this the best area for it? gbviews@gbnews.com. But there's loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. And GB News reveals that at least 450 people have crossed the channel on small boats today. Bear in mind that the Bibby Stockholm, which is that migrant barge that's there in Portland, does actually only house 500 people. That's almost been filled in a day. By close of play today, it would have been filled, wouldn't it, if it was tasked with housing everybody who's come over the channel. But the illegal migration bill, it won last night. The Lords backed down. Archbishop Welby decided that he was going to throw the towel in. Well, OK, but what happens next? Will it actually work? That's what everyone wants to know, and I will be explaining all of that very, very shortly. But right now, it is time for your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The BBC's Director General told a committee today that staff at his corporation are confident in the broadcaster's whistleblowing process. Tim Davie confirmed the organisation has been in touch with the complainant who alleged Hugh Edwards paid a young person for explicit images. GB News understands 450 people have crossed the English Channel in 9 small boats this morning. The news coming as the first group of asylum seekers are to be moved to a migrant barge currently docked off Portland in Dorset next week. The Home Secretary says the risk of a terror attack in the UK is on the rise. Suella Braverman has identified Islamist terrorism as the primary UK domestic threat. She also confirmed Northern Ireland-related terrorism remains a threat, with some dissident groups continuing to carry out attacks. More on all those stories, head to our website, gbnews.com.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain for many of us at the moment and through the rest of the day. Showers for some, and in 1 or 2 spots it is dry and bright. But the rain or showers do ease later. As this little weather feature moves through, it's going to push into the North Sea by the end of the day, peeling away the rain from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and central England. Still some showery bursts for northern and eastern England for a time, and also some showers arriving into the north and northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, but clear spells elsewhere. However, a bit more cloud around and slightly milder air with us, so a less cool night, 15-16 in the south. I think single figures still, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be first thing on Wednesday morning. And also there'll be some sunny spells for Wales, southwest England, a lot of cloud elsewhere. And the early rainfall in the east turns to showers. Widely, actually, we'll see an afternoon of sunny spells and showers. But in between the showers, there will be some warmth in the sun. 23 Celsius in the south, 18 to 20 in the north. The showers heaviest in the east. Thursday sees a return to sunny spells and showers for many, but I think a better chance of drier and brighter interludes at times. Likewise, Friday, a day of sunny spells and showers before some more persistent rain arrives from the northwest later, and that will be with us this weekend.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, thousands of foreign construction workers are set to move to Britain after the government relaxed visa restrictions. Carpenters, bricklayers, roofers, they're among those who will be allowed to apply for work visas and get a discount on fees in a bid to fill the UK job shortages. Here to discuss all of this, I am joined by the Conservative MP, Sir John Hayes. Sir John, thank you very much. This is our top story today, mainly because it does appear to fly in the face of the government's promises to reduce migration and specifically low-skilled migration. How would you respond to that?
I agree with you.
Right.
I think it's incompatible with the desire to drive down migrant numbers, but also, in a way more fundamentally, incompatible with our need to encourage more people to acquire those kind of practical, vocational and technical skills. We want to build a workforce fit for the future, and that means training Britons to do the very jobs you've just described.
Now, Sir John, something that ties in, dare I say it, with a story I just did earlier on about this big mosque being opened up on the West End, but an issue that's gone under the radar for me when it comes to relaxing the migrant visa rules, especially for non-EU countries, is that it will help contribute to a rapid cultural change in Britain and rapid demographic change in Britain. Is that something that the government should also be considering?
Well, you should certainly consider the net migration numbers. So if you introduce something like 600,000 people a year into the country, which is what we did last year, the net migration figures were 600,000, that is bound to both change the shape of the country, but also put unfeasible, irreversible changes in terms of the pressure on public services. What I mean by that, 600,000 people have got to be accommodated. Imagine doing that for 10 years. That's 6 million people, which would mean building many large cities. So you're right, there are social consequences to this. Economic consequences are that you're not equipping Britain to be the high-tech, high-skilled country it needs to be to compete in the future.
Why are we doing this?
We're doing it because we train too few people of our own. I've argued for a very long time, since I was the shadow skills minister, I was then the skills minister from 2010, we need to build more vocational and practical skills. I boosted the number of apprenticeships when I was the minister very considerably, but we need to do more. And ironically, the Prime Minister said that himself yesterday. He said we need more high-quality apprenticeships. Exactly, we do. We need to encourage more people to acquire skills that will deliver personal fulfilment to them and meet an economic need.
Do we have to accept maybe that Britain, as many people are writing in my inbox right now in front of me, that Britain as we know it or knew it is gone?
I don't buy that. I think it's important that we retain all the best of what Britain has been to shape a future which is even greater. I'm an optimist, but I'm a realist. And realistically, we can't continue to support this kind of level of immigration and build the better Britain we want. So those two things can't be reconciled. We need, of course, all advanced countries have people coming and going. That's the nature of an advanced economy, but not in these numbers, and not displace investment in recruitment, in skilling and retaining the right workforce. That's what we need to do. We need to do it urgently.
Is this potentially just a very underhand way of trying to drive down inflation by artificially keeping wages low?
I think it's a way of growing the economy. The Treasury and this slightly odd Migration Advisory Committee, I think they should be called the Myopic Migration Advisory Committee, by the way, what they seem to think is all growth is good growth. So if you increase the population, you grow the economy. But that's not growing per capita improvements to the economy. Per capita growth is what really counts, and neither is it preparing the workforce and the economy for the future. So yes, you can grow the population and thereby grow the economy in simple terms, but it's not good because you stultify the economy in a dependence on imported labour. And that's bad economics, it's bad politics, and it's certainly bad for society.
Well, indeed, I suppose one of the massive problems that Rishi Sunak is going to face is that it's 15 days since the new Conservatives came up and tried to issue a new policy when it comes to migration and gave a very stark warning, which was that they think that you guys might take an absolute kicking if Rishi Sunak doesn't do something about that. And then 15 days on from that, we are going to offer employers in this country the chance to employ people from all over the world for 80%, so a 20% reduction from what they would have to pay Brits. And it doesn't appear to be much of an incentive to, well, back British at the moment, which from a patriotic Brexit-backing party, frankly, just seems like a bit of a balls up.
Well, we should buy British and we should back Britain. You're absolutely right. In relation to the 2 points you made, I mean, I'm involved with the New Conservatives, of course. I think I'm president of the New Conservatives, so I'm closely associated with the paper you described, written by my great friend Tom Hunt. So he pointed out some of the things I've said to you in this interview, that you can't grow the population through legal migration at the pace we are without dire consequences for society and for the economy. But the other point you make is about the character of the pledge we made to British people, both during the Brexit referendum and the 2019 election. People voted to take back control. Now, it's true we now control immigration policy, but when they did so, they assumed that meant controlling it to bring down immigration. That's what the government's to do. It's not only because it's politically popular, but also because it's the right thing to do. And doing what's right matters most.
Look, Sir John, thank you very much. An absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on and have a chat with us. It's Sir John Hayes there, who's the Conservative MP. Well, look, that was the legal side of things. This is the illegal side of things. And this was some good news for Rishi Sunak, because the illegal migration bill was finally approved by the House of Lords. It's the centrepiece of the government's plans to solve the small boats crisis. Peers had dealt a succession of blows to the bill, but the Tory front bench saw off 5 further changes from the Lords last night, and it is now set to become law. But, what does all of this really mean? Because kind of a key cornerstone of it is the Rwanda plan. Well, that's in court, isn't it? It's being caught every 2 minutes. I'm joined by Jeremy Hudson from Migration Watch UK. Jeremy, thank you very, very much. What now?
Hi, Patrick. The next step, of course, I think will be royal assent, but ultimately, once it actually gets onto statute books, that doesn't mean we're going to be suddenly sending people off to Rwanda, because, of course, the government was defeated in the course of appeal quite recently. So it's going to go to the Supreme Court. We don't know exactly when. It could be September, October, possibly sooner, but it's probably going to be around then. And after then, of course, assuming the government win, which is, not an assumption we should put too much money on, it could then go to the European Court of Human Rights, at which point the government will have to decide, do we want to go forward with the bill, or do we want to ignore the European Court and just get people to Rwanda and start creating this deterrent effect so people stop making these dangerous crossings across the channel?
But it does, however, appear that, at least in the short term, that sense has been seen, doesn't it? Which is that it's all very well and good trying to find legal problems or practical issues with a government policy that has received big public backing, that has received backing in the House of Commons from a majority government. It's a completely different kettle of fish, trying to hit back with totally new policies, which is essentially what the House of Lords was trying to do. And people, wreckers-in-chief, like Archbishop Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, it appears now that at least sense has been seen in that regard, because otherwise, frankly, we were going to have to abolish the House of Lords.
Well, it did seem like the House of Lords has come to accept the fact that if they had kept pushing back on the government against this bill, they would have been putting themselves in an impossible position, which happens now and then. But usually, when it comes down to the House of Commons versus House of Lords, it's the House of Lords that blinks first, because they know that if they stick to their guns, well, they might lose their seats entirely.
Which actually makes it all the more pathetic, because all that has happened is that we end up with dither and delay, and more people arrive, and the problem gets worse. And while some people can stand up in the House of Lords, they tap in for however much money it is every day. They get the subsidised transport there, they get the subsidised meals. Oh, it's a lovely life, isn't it? It's a great, lovely, cushy deal if you can get it. I'm pretty sure at least 2 or 3 of those people that our TV viewers will be able to see on those benches now are fast asleep, dozing away, dribbling all over themselves because they've had a couple of glasses of Chateauneuf de Pape at lunch. Isn't it all fantastic? Meanwhile, the country suffers. And you know what? If they were just going to back out of it anyway, then what was the point? We've wasted a load of time. But Jeremy, thank you very much. Jeremy Hudson from Migration Watch UK, always an honour and a privilege. Right, in the last hour, senior BBC bosses have been facing questions on how the corporation handled the allegations against Hugh Edwards. They are also facing now serious questions about the licence fee model. Will it move to subscription? What will happen there? Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Yes, well, loads to go at. I am going to be asking very shortly, why do all of the people coming across the channel appear to be men? But we'll have more of a chat about that later on. The fallout from the Hugh Edwards scandal continues. It rumbles on. The BBC's Director General Tim Davie is among a number of senior officials who were questioned by MPs today. We're going to have a chat about that for the latest facts on it, and then we're going to move the discussion on and talk about a staff survey at the BBC, apparently, which supposedly means that quite a large number of them do not trust their complaints procedure, but also, as well, this licence fee issue, whether or not it can survive and stand on its own 2 feet without you, me and everyone we know having to prop it up. But I'm joined in the studio now for the first bit of this chat by GB News' national reporter Paul Hawkins. So, the grilling, what happened?
Yeah, I'm always wary to use the term grilling. This is the House of Lords committee, so it's more of a sauté, really, than the kind of grillings you get from the committees in the House of Commons as the Lords Communications Committee. This was a scheduled hearing. This wasn't a specially convened one because of the Hugh Edwards situation. It was always going to happen anyway. But top of their list were questions about how the BBC dealt with Hugh Edwards. So appearing before the committee was the Director General Tim Davie, also the Acting Chair Dame Ellen Closs-Stevens, and the Director of Policy, Claire Sumner. They answered questions about how the investigation is going. And what we learned this afternoon was that the BBC has been in contact with the complainant in the Hugh Edwards case. But he could only go so far, he said, in discussing details due to concerns over privacy. And he also gave this update on where we are in terms of timescales with the investigation.
We're in the process of looking at those facts. And I would say we're keen to receive any information because we just want to understand anything that's out there. It's difficult to give you a precise time on that. The reason is because you have to go through that diligently, assess the information. There's also duty of care concerns within that. So on that one specifically, because I'm not in control of all the variables, that could take weeks or it could take a couple of months depending on, or even longer depending on what we get and managing the individuals involved flawlessly. And my main priority is to be fair, make sure we get all the information into that process and act judiciously.
So, to be clear, we're still in the planning stages of this investigation. So the Chief Operating Officer will take charge, along with a senior partner at a company called Deloitte. They will publish the full terms of... They'll put the full terms of reference for this to the board. They'll vote on it. They'll then publish that on Thursday. And then an inquiry will get underway as soon as possible. Just very quickly, also, during this afternoon's session, Tim Davie was asked how allegations against well-known presenters are handled. And he said the history of this industry is such that we should all be concerned, adding that the BBC needs to be appropriately diligent about abuse of people in powerful positions. We have a good process for handling internal complaints, he said, adding, noting the establishment of a whistleblowing process. I know you're about to talk about a BBC survey. We've got most people very confident on it, but he admits there are still gaps in it.
Good stuff, Paul. Thank you very, very much. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter. Right, well, it has been reported that the way the BBC is funded is set to be reviewed, with the future of the licence fee in doubt. This rears its head all the time, doesn't it, this kind of stuff? But maybe now more so than ever, you know, cost of living crisis, as it were, everything that's been going on at the BBC, do you really want to have to pay for it? And they talk about, well, we can take more creative risks if we're not, you know, at the mercy of advertisers, etc. But what are those creative risks, really? You know, is it just something else about drag queens? But worryingly for the BBC, though, it's emerged 38% of its staff don't trust the corporation's complaints process. Here to pick the bones out of this one is former BBC correspondent, friend of the show, friend of the channel, it's Michael Cole. Michael, thank you very, very much. Well, look, first things first, a BBC staff survey shock. Does it shock you?
Well, that is quite interesting. There is certainly a history here, Patrick, because Tim Davie is talking about being proud of the code of conduct and being behind the whistleblowing ability of people to call out things that are wrong. But we don't have to think too far back to remember that a Newsnight investigation and expose of Jimmy Savile was suppressed. It was not put on the air. It was pulled because it would have clashed with a tribute to Jimmy Savile that was going out at Christmas time. Now, we can't have both those things at the same time. Tim Davie, I thought, looked rather uncomfortable there and, frankly, out of his depth, because he says that the corporation is now in touch with the family of this troubled young man. But, of course, between the time that his mother made the first complaint and 6 weeks later, the BBC made 2 desultory attempts to get in touch with them and failed to do so. And it was only when they acted when the Sun put the allegations to them. And that was only 1 day after Hugh Edwards has been on the air in Edinburgh, and a very important state occasion, commenting. You know, look, this is live broadcasting. You and I are broadcasting live at the moment. We could say anything we liked. And here we had the face of the BBC, the lead commentator, who was apparently suffering very severe mental health problems, so severe that he had to go straight into hospital when the scandal broke. And yet, you know, he was there. He was talking about his depression. He was talking about his insomnia. He was talking about his migraines in interviews. He was saying strange things like, I want to be Piers Morgan. And nobody was noticing. Who were the managers who should have been saying, what is wrong with this guy? And yet he was on air. I mean, if British Airways had a pilot who was showing clear signs of mental turmoil and they allowed him to fly 350 people to New York and he crashed, my goodness, they would be rightly castigated and the airline will probably go out of business. So who is actually in charge on the flight deck of Starship BBC?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is really interesting when it comes as well to the BBC basically openly saying, well, we are allowed to take more commercial risks if we don't have to operate in a commercial environment. That's one way of putting it. I would also argue that you don't actually face the pressure of having to produce content that your viewers actually want to see. And that is another massive, massive problem. But, Michael, I'm afraid I'm so sorry about this. We have overrun a little bit, so we're going to have to call it a day there. But you sound like a man in demand anyway. I could hear your phone going off there, so I'm sure you'll be getting another...
sorry about that.
You'll be getting another job in just a moment's time. Don't worry. Look, Michael Cole, thank you. I'll talk to you for longer next time. It's Michael Cole there, of course, the former BBC presenter, right, and correspondent, I should say. Look, loads of interesting stuff coming in the inbox here, especially in relation to that big mosque that's opening up on the West End. A lot of people saying, Patrick, we are a Christian country. Yeah, fine, but has the Church of England not gone woke, and is it not going broke? Is that not a visible sign of perhaps why some elements of the Muslim community are on the rise, whereas elements of the Christian community in this country feel a little bit lost? But a reminder of that news that broke earlier in the show. 450 channel boat crossings today. We'll bring you all the latest on that very, very shortly. And I will be asking why, oh, why, oh, why do they all seem to be young men? Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain for many of us at the moment and through the rest of the day. Showers for some, and in one or two spots it is dry and bright. But the rain or showers do ease later as this little weather feature moves through. It's going to push into the North Sea by the end of the day, peeling away the rain from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and central England. Still some showery bursts for northern and eastern England for a time, and also some showers arriving into the north and northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, but clear spells elsewhere. However, a bit more cloud around and slightly milder air with us, so a less cool night, 15-16 in the south. I think single figures still, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be first thing on Wednesday morning. And also there'll be some sunny spells for Wales, southwest England, a lot of cloud elsewhere. And the early rainfall in the east turns to showers. Widely, actually, we'll see an afternoon of sunny spells and showers. But in between the showers, there will be some warmth in the sun. 23 Celsius in the south, 18 to 20 in the north. The showers heaviest in the east. Thursday sees a return to sunny spells and showers for many, but I think a better chance of drier and brighter interludes at times. Likewise, Friday, a day of sunny spells and showers before some more persistent rain arrives from the northwest later, and that will be with us this weekend.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, we're going to read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Big final hour coming your way with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. What I want to know is why is it just men who appear to be coming across the channel and now occupying all of these new migrant facilities? Where are all the women and children who are in desperate need of asylum and refuge? Are we drilling down on that? In other news, we're going to be talking about this. Anjem Choudhury has reportedly been arrested for a terror offence. We'll bring you up to date with that and also tie in the state of play for terrorism in the UK as it currently stands. Now, Keir Starmer, well, 1 minute he's riding high in the polls. We have these by-elections coming up, don't we? But is he actually facing an internal revolt from inside? They're talking about one U-turn too many this time, and they're wondering whether or not even a senior member of the shadow cabinet might be about to quit over it. Shocking stuff, if true. And finally, let's round the hour off with this. Yes, this was a huge controversy at the time, massively divided the British public, almost straight down the middle. A lady who was sent to jail after basically carrying out a very close to full-term abortion at home has now been freed from jail after, well, what? Just a couple of weeks, really? Just a few weeks. It really opens up this particular can of worms again, which we will, of course, be discussing. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel. Yes, well, Polly with your headlines in just a sec, but get those emails coming in thick and fast, gbviews@gbnews.com, and we'll be looking at whether or not we actually are accepting in far too many men coming across the channel, why that is, and keep those emails coming in about why you are, if you are, opposed to a big new mosque in central London. People are saying, well, we're still a Christian country. Are we still a Christian country? gbviews@gbnews.com, headlines now.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to our top stories this hour. The BBC's Director General has told a parliamentary committee that staff at his corporation are confident in the broadcaster's whistleblowing process. The House of Lords Communications and Digital Committee asked Tim Davie why the organisation didn't take allegations against its most highly paid news presenter more seriously and much sooner. The BBC boss confirmed that the organisation has been in touch with the complainant who alleged Hugh Edwards paid a young person for explicit images since the allegations were published in The Sun. Tim Davie says the investigation could take a while to reach its conclusion.
It's difficult to give you a precise time on that. The reason is because you have to go through that diligently, assess the information. There's also duty of care concerns within that. So on that one specifically, because I'm not in control of all the variables, that could take weeks or it could take a couple of months, depending on, or even longer, depending on what we get and managing the individuals involved flawlessly. And my main priority is to be fair, make sure we get all the information into that process and act judiciously.
GB News understands 450 people have crossed the English Channel in 9 small boats today. The news comes as the first group of asylum seekers will be moved to a migrant barge currently docked in Portland in Dorset next week. The Baby Stockholm, as it's named, will be used to house single male asylum seekers as part of the government's plan to reduce the cost of housing them in hotels. Local residents are calling for the barge to be moved elsewhere and say that protesters at the scene aren't even from their area. The Secretary for Energy Security and Net Zero, Grant Shapps, says the key priority is to control the UK's borders.
It's incredibly important that government has control over who comes to the country. Last night, we passed a milestone by finally defeating Labour, both in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, who have voted dozens and dozens of times against a bill designed to stop the small boats. We are trying to make sure that we can control our borders, and that is the difference between a Conservative government who want to control our borders and a Labour government who simply have no answer.
The Home Secretary says the risk of a terror attack in the UK is on the rise. Speaking in Westminster today, Suella Braverman identified Islamist terrorism as the primary UK domestic threat. Ms Braverman also confirmed Northern Ireland-related terrorism remained a threat, with some dissident groups continuing to plan attacks. The Home Secretary warned of Russia as well, and Iran and China, but referring to Russia as the most pressing national security concern.
Terrorist attacks are becoming increasingly unpredictable, making them harder to detect and investigate. Today, unlike in previous years, terrorist movements are increasingly fragmented and disparate, and there are emerging threats from the extreme right and from abroad. Despite the prevalence of lower sophistication attacks in the UK, the threat today is more diverse, dynamic and complex.
Suella Braverman. Now, the former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs says he's relieved at being cleared of domestic violence allegations after charges against him were dropped. The 49-year-old was due to stand trial for a second time, accused of controlling or coercive behaviour towards his ex-girlfriend Kate Greville, but lawyers have withdrawn the prosecution. Ryan Giggs denies the offences, and his previous trial ended last August, with the jury failing to reach a verdict. A US national has crossed the border from South to North Korea and is being held in the north, that's according to the United Nations. US officials say the individual is a member of the US military who was taking part in a tour of the joint security area and crossed the military demarcation line separating the two Koreas. The EU is sending firefighting planes to Greece as the country attempts to tackle wildfires due to an extreme summer heatwave being felt across southern Europe. British holiday destinations such as Spain, Italy, Greece and parts of the Balkans are also being hit with very high temperatures. The Greek Prime Minister is cutting short his trip to Brussels to oversee government activities as the fires rage, and smoke from the fires are so widespread they can be seen from space. A solution to the 2026 Commonwealth Games no longer being held in Victoria, Australia, can be found. And the idea that the UK could host the Games is premature just yet, says Number 10. The State of Victoria decided to withdraw as host of the 2026 Games because it worked out too expensive, costing more than £3 billion, 3 times more than they had originally expected. That's it from me in the newsroom. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
When it comes to the Channel migrant crisis, where are all the women and children? These are the most vulnerable, the most in need of refuge and asylum, aren't they? These are the people that Brits are willing to have a huge amount of sympathy for and to even take into their own homes, like with the Ukrainians. The women and children are the ones, surely, who are the most desperate. Well, according to the Home Office, 87% of small boat arrivals in 2022 were male. From 2018 to June 2022, 95% of Albanian small boat arrivals were men. Statistics released by Immigration Enforcement showed that 75% of arrivals up to mid-2021 were between the ages of 18 and 39. Now, RAF Scampton and Wethersfield, they will only house men. The Bibby Stockholm, men only. I'll take a look at some of these pictures that Nigel Farage tweeted earlier from today's Channel Crossing. So these are from today. They're all men, I think, aren't they? Yeah. Yeah, they're all men. Well, according to a report by Migration Watch, 98% of those crossings in boats did not actually possess... We might have a woman there, do we? One woman? No, they're all men. All men. There we go. 98% of those crossings in boats did not possess a passport at the time of processing. So it would be quite easy to suggest, wouldn't it, that we are welcoming in a load of young men who are gaming the system and pretending to be asylum seekers, or a load of genuine asylum seekers who have decided to leave their wives and children to the slaughter abroad and seek out a better life for themselves in Britain. Now, I don't think that either of those things are particularly good. I think it's about time to have a serious conversation, in fact, it's long overdue, actually, about how many young men are coming across and some of the clear and present dangers that that poses. GB Views at gbnews.com. Get those views coming in thick and fast. I'm joined now by the former Director General of UK Border Forces, Tony Smith. Tony, thank you very, very much. Where are all the women and children?
Well, of course, as you know, Patrick, we don't select who gets to come across the channel. That's done by the human smuggling gangs, and the young men are the ones that are probably fit enough and affluent enough to be able to pay for their passage. And so you're right that actually what's happening is we're not admitting the most vulnerable people around the world into our asylum system. We're admitting those that can afford to come and are fit enough to travel across Europe and pay a smuggler to do so.
And it would be yet another example of why actually it may even be the kind thing to do to stop what's going on in the channel, so that we would have more money, time and resources and accommodation for people who are in genuine need, like, dare I say it, actual women and children.
Yeah, well, as you know, Patrick, my beef has always been with the smugglers, the human smugglers. Got a real problem with them. I've dealt with them during my career. They're nasty people. They don't care at all for human life. They don't care who drowns. They're only in it for the money. And so they're not really interested in providing safe passage for vulnerable people into the UK. There's no welfare application from their point of view. But you're right. I mean, there are vulnerable people in war zones around the world that do need protection, do need help and the care of UNHCR. They're not getting a look in. Essentially because we are completely preoccupied with these criminal gangs that continue to bring young males over here, some of whom may well, be from countries where they may have a claim, but many of whom are not, simply gainsaying the system because they can.
Do you think that, just in reality, it is a lot of young men who are perfectly safe and want to try to have a better life? Is that just what it is?
Well, I've been over there. I've spoken to some of them. I've been on the boats, Patrick. I speak to a lot of Border Force officers. So this is a mixed cohort of people. Some of them, many of them, have been in Europe for a very, very long time. They just prefer to come here and will pay to come across. Some of them may have even claimed asylum in Europe. But then again, you look at the figures, quite a lot of the ones last year that were granted asylum do originate from countries like Iran, Iraq, Syria, or Afghanistan, where it's virtually impossible to return someone and may have a very, very good claim for asylum. The latest I'm hearing, though, is that these cohorts are changing. They change all the time. The cross Central Med route is the big one now. If you look on the Frontex figures, Patrick, Central Med, that's bringing people in from sub-Saharan Africa, getting more in Egyptians, a lot more from Turkey. These are countries where we are able to return people, and we've really got to find a way now. We've got this new bill to get those people removed and send a message that it's not going to work. If you come across in a small boat, you're going to get sent back, and I think that's what this new bill is trying to do.
The Bibby Stockholm is going to be 500 men, and then we end up with RAF Scampton. I think that's about 1,700, if not 2,000 men. Similar numbers when we talk about RAF Wethersfield. Anyone who's ever spent any time just walking past one of these asylum seeker hotels or trying to investigate any of them as well can clearly see that the majority of them are men. The actual Home Office figures show that the majority of them are men as well. Is it time that we had a serious conversation about the clear and present dangers that it imposes to import that many young men into a country from very dubious backgrounds?
Well, this is the other problem. You know, got 51,000 destitute migrants now, costing $6 million per day to be housed largely in hotels. So the Home Office is trying very hard to find other places to decant them to. But as you know, and as your reports regularly say, they're finding that very difficult because a lot of people, be they MPs or local communities, are not interested in having large numbers of asylum seekers housed in their communities. So if you turn up here and you have got somewhere to stay, and we're satisfied you've got a genuine sponsor, you will be given bail and allowed to stay with that person. But we've got a very, very large number of people arriving on these boats that simply don't have anywhere to go because they claim to be destitute. That's why the government is trying so hard to find places and opportunities like this, which aren't hotel rooms, but at least give us somewhere where we can place them safely until they can be properly dealt with.
Some people make the point that maybe this country shouldn't be particularly opening and welcoming to a load of people who are of a quote-unquote fighting age, who could have potentially gone and stayed around in their own country to sort the mess out for themselves over there, when there are women and children who would need saving. What would your views on that be?
Well, I agree that we're not selecting, as I said at the top of this interview, we're not selecting who gets to come on the boats, Patrick. That's being done by the human smuggling gangs. I would like to see us select people. We've done that with Ukraine. We've done that with vulnerable people. We have responsibilities in Hong Kong. But actually, a lot of the people coming on these boats have been in third countries, not just passed through, Patrick. They've been in safe third countries for a very, very long time. They're simply taking an opportunity here because they can to get in the British territorial waters and claim asylum, so they would prefer to stay here. And I don't think that's a proper selection process for refugees in this country.
But you've dealt with people smugglers, you've dealt with human traffickers, you've dealt with the kind of people coming across the channel. Where do the women and children go? Do they just not go very far? Do they tend to just stay in a relative locality? Do they go, let's say they're coming from Iraq or Syria, if indeed they are? Do they stay in Turkey? Where do they go? Because they're not really coming to a holiday inn near you, are they?
Well, there are occasions where family groups do embark across perilous journeys across multiple borders. I think there's good evidence of that, and you can see that many of them do set out on the journey. But I think the more common model now is for the young, fitter males who can afford to pay to leave relatives behind, and then if they can get into the UK and gain a foothold here, then send for their relatives later on down the line, because these journeys are really dangerous, Patrick. I'm amazed, and the Border Force will tell you, amazed there's not been more drownings out there. And usually, in my experience, there is a token woman or two, often a pregnant woman on a dinghy and a young child, because that helps their case. If someone approaches and they don't want to be rescued, then I've seen babies being hung with they don't want to be.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but that actually just infuriates me, and I know it will infuriate a lot of our viewers and listeners as well. This idea that we need to have a huge amount of sympathy for people who are willing to stack a dinghy full of young men and then shove a token pregnant woman or young child on there and push them out into the busiest shipping lane in the world, just simply with a desire to make it easier for them to stay. I'm sorry, but who is to blame if they die?
Well, it's the smugglers that are to blame because they're the ones that are behind all of this, Patrick. But ultimately, it does require a solution with the French, doesn't it? And with our partners in Europe, because, you know, if we had that agreement that I've been advocating from day one with the French, which is perfectly feasible in international law, that we had joint patrols and anybody on these boats could immediately be returned to Calais. They don't fear persecution there. You could stop this at an instant. And I think there's a lot of political support for that. Unfortunately, though, Patrick, there's not that kind of support that I can see in Brussels or in Paris.
No, indeed. It is absolutely staggering to me that that can be the case. And I think it's just worthwhile noting, isn't it? Again, where are all the women and children? Those are the people that should be in need of refuge the most. Those are the people who should be in need of asylum the most. And if it is the case, which you appear to be suggesting, as the former Director General of UK Border Force, Tony, I've got absolutely no reason to disbelieve anything that you have to say to me. You know so much more about this than anybody else out there, arguably. If it is the case that people want to come over here, leave their families abroad to create a foothold here and then look to bring them back, I would question how much need of urgent asylum those people are, because if you are in need of it, you would just get out and you would get everybody out. That would be my view on it. But Tony, thank you very much. It is always a pleasure. Great to have you on the show. Tony Smith there, former Director General of UK Border Force. Yeah, when you look at the pictures of boats coming across, you look at the amount of RAF bases that are being used now just for men, and you look, frankly, just at the stats as well. 87% of small boat arrivals in 2022 were male, and that, by the way, does not include, as far as I'm I'm aware, the amount of people claiming to be children on top of that as well. You've then obviously got 75% of the arrivals between up to mid-2021 were between the ages of 18 and 39, and supposedly anyway, according to Migration Watch, 98% of those did not possess passports or any form of documentation. It is very easy to jump to the conclusion, is it not, that there are a lot of young men coming over here without documentation, not necessarily seeking asylum from anything, but just purely for economic reasons. GBviews at gbnews.com. Get more of this story on our website, which is, of course, gbnews.com. It is the fastest growing national news website in the country. All the best analysis, big opinion, loads of breaking news. But we are, of course, launching a little campaign as well. Well, in fact, it's not that little. It's actually quite a large campaign now, which is great stuff. All power to the GB News people and all of that. Is to stop the UK becoming a cashless society. The campaign is called Don't Kill Cash, and it's proving to be very popular. Already, more than 224,000 of you have signed it, which means that realistically, we're probably, almost definitely going to get it debated in the House of Commons, which is great stuff. The petition is on our website, gbnews.com/cash, or if you've got a smartphone, just use it. It's dead easy. There's a QR code on your screen right now. Have a look at it, hold your phone up to it, and your phone, frankly, does the work for you. Go to GB News with our campaign and tell the authorities to don't kill cash. But there we go. Now, Suella Braverman, she's been on. She's warned that the threat of a terror attack in the UK is unfortunately still rising. I will also have the latest on Anjem Choudhury as well, a very well-known figure who, according to reports, was earlier on anyway arrested on suspicion of a terror offence. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and this is Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Right, well, in a moment, I will bring you news of the country's new counter-terrorism strategy, as Suella Braverman warns that the threat of an attack into the UK is rising. And the woman who was jailed, now, this was massively controversial at the time, massively controversial, divided the country big time. Well, it's reared its head again, because, yeah, the woman who was jailed for obtaining tablets to end pregnancy right towards the final bit of the term, actually, it must be said, will be released from prison after a High Court appeal. Strong views on that. We'll talk about that shortly. But now, has Keir Starmer performed one U-turn too many? The Labour leader says that he won't remove the two-child benefit cap if they win the next general election. During his leadership campaign in 2020, Sir Keir said that he would scrap the cap. Well, in the past, the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, has described the cap as obscene and inhumane, and Asawa, for example, says that Scottish Labour is opposed to the cap. Joining me now is the former Labour Special Advisor and columnist, Paul Richards. Paul, thank you very much. Look, what do you make of this, then? I mean, is he in the business of performing U-turns, do you think?
He's trying to win an election, so what he's doing here is trying to present a new Labour Party, very different from the one that got massively rejected in 2019, based on fiscal responsibility. You can't make lots of promises if you can't fund them. You can't just throw things out there and, you know, offer a shopping list of things to the British public, because the British public are not stupid. So I think it's not really about welfare policy, this. Actually, it's about economic policy. And what Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are trying to do is look fiscally responsible, because they know the mountain they have to climb is so huge.
Do you think it's just something he's saying then to get elected, and the reality of a Keir Starmer government will actually be pretty lefty?
Well, I think he'll have to reinvent the social security system, because it's not working. And, I mean, the whole point of the two-child policy was to get people back to work, and it hasn't worked. It's failed. It's just driven people into poverty. But don't forget, Labour hasn't won an election since 2005. Labour isn't in power now. Some of the politicians that are on the airwaves at the moment, it's as though Labour was in government doing these things. This is just a policy ahead of a general election. And so, you know, we have to win the election first before you can have... You can't shout betrayal before you've won, surely.
Well, has he got a massive issue, though, with the left of his party? I mean, the usual types like Owen Jones, for example, are piping up, and there's even talk... Well, it's a widely held behind-the-scenes view that him and Angela Rayner aren't exactly best mates, right? And so, yeah, is there actually a massive divide between Keir Starmer, the potential Prime Minister, and what the left of the Labour Party want him to be?
Well, there are people on the left of the Labour Party, some are still in the Labour Party, some of them outside of the Labour Party, who want to tear him down. I mean, that is part of his definition, but actually he won't mind that, because it gives him that dividing line between what had happened between 2015 and 2019. So actually it doesn't do him any harm to have enemies on the left, because that will help him win votes on the right.
So do you think that there's any chance of a Labour Party implosion? Because from where I'm sitting right now, that will be the best hope for the Conservative Party, is the fact that the Labour Party just manages to eat itself.
No, because you'll remember exactly the same kind of rows that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown had in the sort of 95, 96 period before that landslide. I'm not saying it's going to be a landslide, but it's similar. And they just know that if, you know, noise is off, the usual suspects making a row saying betrayal, betrayal, it doesn't do any harm at all. Actually, it gets people to listen and look at Labour again, maybe for the first time, and think about voting Labour based on this economic responsibility.
Do you think that Labour is ready to rule?
Yes, I do. I mean, we've been out of power for a long time, but I think there are some really good people now in the shadow cabinet, some real grown-ups now in the room. I think Starmer, I know we think he's boring, we wouldn't necessarily go for a pint with him, but he is somebody who can run a country.
I do now think the same about Rishi Sunak, to be fair. So, I mean, it's a toss-up between two dullards, if you ask me. But,
sure, but we're not choosing to go for a drink with somebody who can be a sound administrator, run the country, look after our security. I thought Yvette Cooper's speech was very good, by the way, yesterday on national security. So Labour is getting its house in order and it's got grown-ups in the room who can take us forward.
Does he actually have a clear ideology, though? Because, you know, this guy was Mr Remain for a long time. He's saying, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to row back on that. You know, he was more than capable of backing up Jeremy Corbyn for a very long period of time, going into bat for him. Well, now he appears to be doing everything he can to distance himself from that. The left of the party aren't particularly happy with him. I mean, I would make the same criticism of the Conservative Party, by the way, which is that at the moment, and for too long, we have been led by people who are doing sticking plaster policies and not actually anything to do with genuine ideology. And I think that's a problem, because it's just the tail wagging the dog. But is Keir Starmer more of that?
I'm not sure we want more ideology, do we? I think we want sound administration, a government that gets on with it, a government that doesn't do any harm and lets us all get on with our lives. So isn't that what we want? I don't want to be led by ideologues. I want sane, sensible people with good values. And you ask, you know, what is his mission? I would say social justice is the one thread that runs throughout.
What does that look like, then? What is that?
Well, I think he believes in fairness. I think he believes people should be able to get on in life. You know, the government can help you where it can and get out of the way where it should.
Because I was having a look, for example, at Yvette Cooper. Now, her version of social justice would appear to be, according to her Twitter page, was never allowing anybody who has a full-term at-home abortion to ever go to prison. I'm not sure that's social justice.
Well, I wouldn't believe everything you read on Twitter, for a start.
Well, she wrote it.
But, you'd have to quiz her on that particular one. But I think there is a leadership team now around Starmer, and I would include Wes Streeting in that. I would include Bridget Phillipson, Rachel Reeves, you know, grown-up people now who are going to do a good job. And I think the country is ready for a change. I don't think we need another 5 years, another 5 years after that of this same lot that we have at the moment, because, you know, you'll be the first to admit it's not really working, is it?
No, it's not working. No, it's not at all. One of my biggest bugbears is that I just don't see it really working, no matter who's in charge at the moment, which is rather annoying.
Give us a chance.
Give you a go. There you go. Look, thank you very much. Always an absolute pleasure to have you in the studio. Much appreciated. That is the former Labour Special Advisor and columnist Paul Richards. Right, OK, loads more to come between now and 6 o'clock. There is a start warning from Suella Braverman. She's unveiled the country's new counter-terrorism strategy. What will that look like? Where's the main threat coming from? What on earth is going on? I've got all of that coming your way and much, much more. I will also be talking about, yes, big controversial topic this lady who did have that kind of at-home, basically full-term abortion. She was sentenced to prison. Well, now apparently she's just going to be released pretty much immediately. I mean, what's it been, a few weeks at most? Well, actually, is that justice? Do you think that's right? It has divided the nation. We'll be having a discussion as to whether or not anything like that should ever actually be punishable by prison. But now it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The BBC's Director General has told the House of Lords Communications and Digital Committee today that staff at the corporation are confident in the broadcaster's whistleblowing processes. Tim Davie explained the organisation has been in touch with the complainant, who alleged Hugh Edwards paid a young person for explicit images since the allegations were published in The Sun. GB News understands 450 migrants have crossed the English Channel in 9 small boats this morning. The news comes as the first group of asylum seekers will be moved to a migrant barge currently docked in Portland in Dorset next week. And the Home Secretary says the risk of a terror attack in the UK is on the rise. Suella Braverman identified Islamist terrorism as the primary UK domestic threat. She also confirmed Northern Ireland-related terrorism remains a significant threat, with some dissident groups continuing to plan attacks. Those are the headlines. More on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Quick snapshot of today's markets for you, and the pound buying you $1.3042 and €1.1621. The price of gold, £1,518.58 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day at 7,453 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain for many of us at the moment and through the rest of the day. Showers for some, and in one or two spots it is dry and bright. But the rain or showers do ease later as this little weather feature moves through. It's going to push into the North Sea by the end of the day, peeling away the rain from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and central England. Still some showery bursts for northern and eastern England for a time, and also some showers arriving into the north and northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, but clear spells elsewhere. However, a bit more cloud around and slightly milder air with us, so a less cool night, 15-16 in the south. I think single figures still, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be first thing on Wednesday morning. And also there'll be some sunny spells for Wales, southwest England, a lot of cloud elsewhere. And the early rainfall in the east turns to showers. Widely, actually, we'll see an afternoon of sunny spells and showers. But in between the showers, there will be some warmth in the sun. 23 Celsius in the south, 18 to 20 in the north. The showers heaviest in the east. Thursday sees a return to sunny spells and showers for many, but I think a better chance of drier and brighter interludes at times. Likewise, Friday, a day of sunny spells and showers before some more persistent rain arrives from the northwest later, and that will be with us this weekend.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, it's reported that Muslim hate preacher Anjem Chowdhury is still being held by police after he was arrested yesterday morning. According to reports, detectives raided the 56-year-old Chowdhury's home in Ilford about 5:40 a.m. on Monday. Scotland Yard counter-terrorism officers arrested a second man, a Canadian national, 28 years old, who landed at Heathrow on a flight from Canada 7 hours later. Both men were held on suspicion of being members of a banned organisation in contravention of the Terrorism Act 2000. The pair were being quizzed at a West London police station as police searched 3 properties in East London. That is the latest, of course. Any more we will bring to you as we get it. But that news broke on the day that Suella Braverman revealed that Islamic terrorism is still a major threat to Britain. The Home Secretary also warned that Russia is also using terrorism to sow division in the UK as she laid out the government's new counter-terror strategy. Joining me now is Kevin Hurley, former head of counter-terrorism at City of London Police. Kevin, thank you very, very much. So Suella Braverman outlining the new counter-terrorism strategy, basically saying that the greatest threat does still come from Islamist terrorists. What do you make of it?
Well, she's absolutely right. I mean, we woke up to the world once the Twin Towers came down, and those people who work in the counter-terrorist world have never looked back, quite honestly. There's absolutely no doubt that there remains a threat to us in the UK, mainly from our own homegrown people. You know, it's nothing to do with people coming over on the illegal boats and so on, although there might be the odd person there. But the bottom line is our own British children, for various reasons, are getting radicalised online, or in terms of Islamist terrorism, in extremist mosques that preach Salafist extreme jihadist behaviour. And this will pertain, frankly, I can't see any end to it. It's going to carry on, and it's good that government are focused. And what I'm particularly pleased about is to see Mr. Chowdhury yet alone getting arrested, as he probably does as he did before, which is live off our social benefits.
Well, there we go. I'm just going to say now, so this counter-terrorism strategy is called Contest, and as you were alluding to there, Suella Braverman has identified the fact that in prisons, she believes that there is a massive issue when it comes to radicalisation. She also identified the online world, and also has been talking as well about the threat that Russia poses when it comes to terrorism. And I just wondered if what you made of that. I mean, you know, look, Russia is obviously deemed to be a kind of bad actor in the world, but I'm not sure I would necessarily associate that with terrorism on the streets of Britain.
Well, the thing is about the Russians and Putin and his team, they come from a long heritage with the KGB about being disruptive and using what might be known as asymmetric warfare techniques. which is used in other ways to cause countries issues or problems. And of course, at the moment, we are #1 subject of dislike by Mr. Putin because of the way in which the government has supported the Ukrainians to hold the Russians off. So some ways to hurt us are to stir up trouble and dissent within the UK, particularly amongst Islamists who are likely to swallow the jihadist nutcase side of life. And when you bear in mind that he's got a lot of Chechens in his armed forces, that Chechen army, who are now his tame Islamist fighters, they've got plenty of knowledge and plenty of extremists there, quite able to use online means to propagate what he wants to do, which is disrupt our society so that we don't provide the weapons that the Ukrainians need to defeat him.
Yeah, now, this is interesting from Suella Braverman, OK, which is counter-terrorism policing has around 800 live investigations and last year made 169 arrests for terror-related offences. She went on to say 2 terror plots have been foiled in the past 7 months alone. I mean, for want of a better phrase, it is a ticking time bomb here, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I'm surprised they're only saying 2 foiled in the last 7 months because, you know, there are several thousand people that are people of concern to the security forces, mainly the police and MI5. And amongst any of those is someone who is likely to go off the rails. If you look at most of our own homegrown terrorists, they've got a couple of things in common. Quite honestly, they've got personal issues and problems about how they see the world. They tend to be insecure young males with too much testosterone who want to demonstrate, that they are someone to be heard and to be listened to. And a lot of them, and this is why prisons are important, a lot of them have got a history of failed lives in that they've been to prison on a number of occasions. The Peckham mugger, if you like, the shoe bomber, Richard Reed, who tried to bring down the airliner, was a classic example of that. Went to the Brixton Mosque, was a street robber, known to a lot of us, who ended up going down that route. And of course, in the prisons, we got real problems now where they are running some of the wings and causing prison staff a lot of problems in trying to manage them.
Yeah, look, let's be completely honest about it. A lot of these people who want to be terrorists are actually very sad little men who quite often can't get a girlfriend or a wife, and if they can, to be honest with you, I wouldn't necessarily be that pleased with what I've got. And then you look at them now, they can't really potentially get a job because they might already have a criminal record and they think life is hopeless and they want to try and be some kind of hero in their own homes. They are just pathetic. Unfortunately, though, some of those pathetic people do kill people on the streets of Britain, and that, of course, is an absolute nightmare. Suella Braverman does talk a lot about the proliferation of modern technology online and how difficult it is to keep tabs on that. This will be a fine balancing act because the average Joe on the street who just uses one of these things, a phone or a laptop here that I've got here, for nothing nefarious whatsoever, we don't want to end up having huge amount of restrictions on what we can and can't do and huge amount of these, online safety bills, which are derived around protecting against the lowest common denominator, aren't they? Your kind of evil people who go out there and seek out jihadi material. So it's a delicate balancing act between clamping down on those people and upholding basic public freedoms.
Well, I think you make a very good point. But I think one area where the police in particular, because MI5, of course, take a lower profile, could do far better is being much, much more agile around the use of social media in relation to any particular event. The police generally in the UK are woefully poor at responding to any story that's negative or unhelpful. And I would like to see a situation where the police in UK, as a matter of policy, across the board, but including terrorism, have got teams of people constantly monitoring what's going on and developing counter-narratives on Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, a whole lot of them that kids follow because one thing I learned when I was out in Afghanistan, I was a senior police advisor out there advising on the Taliban, is they were streets ahead of the entire NATO effort at using social media. Yeah. They would set us up constantly and spread the word so that millions of people in Afghanistan thought that we were up to bad stuff. and it would take days before we'd react. And the UK police are actually no different at getting out a different counter-narrative. I mean, with the exception of GB News and people like yourself, no one else puts out a different narrative.
No, well, no, indeed. And that does actually never cease to amaze me, because when I also read this headline that the UK security agencies have foiled 39 late-stage terror plots since 2018, actually, it is staggering to think about the amount of people that wish us harm, but also the amount of homegrown people who wish us harm. And this is my ongoing concern, which is that we have people who now were not just born and raised here, but their mum and dads were born and raised here as well. So the second generation of people, the people who have grown up and reaped all the benefits of our society, etc., and for some reason want to turn it into essentially an Islamic state. And that is a huge worry.
It is. And I mean, you know, there's some things that could be done far better. And when I was involved as a police and crime commissioner in Surrey, I was kind of banging this drum. We need to find out who is financing the growth in some of the more extremist mosques around the UK, because they're popping up everywhere. And you will probably find they are very often Saudi Arabian businessmen who are behind many of these extremist mosques that are developing, where they then insist to the management committees of the mosques that their own extremist imams must be brought in, who've been taught around madrasas in Lahore in Pakistan and so on, who then literally teach hatred. And there's a fine balance here, but one of them is, when we're talking about granting planning permission for a mosque, find out where the money's coming from and make sure the funding is coming from reasonable people. Then we don't get people coming in poisoning the minds of our young British people.
Are you by any chance, I don't know if you are, but it does tie in rather seamlessly with the story we were talking about earlier, if indeed you are, which is London's famous Trocadero is now being turned into a mosque. A billionaire there that has been labelled as Britain's cruelest landlord, anyway, has apparently decided to buy Azif Aziz. He's 56 years old, is a property tycoon known, well, by Mr. West End, is plonking a mosque that can have a capacity for 390 worshippers in the vacant Metro Cinema, you know, right in the slap bang in the middle of Piccadilly Circus and Soho, which, I mean, dare I say, when it comes to Soho, might clash slightly with some of the other clientele that are on offer in Soho there. But, I mean, would you be having a long, hard look at this and whether or not the planning permission there is, for want of a better phrase, kosher?
Well, I would do. I would be looking to see where the funding stream is for that and where Mr. Aziz's links are and so on. He may well be a perfectly reasonable, devout Muslim, which everyone's entitled to be, who wants to do that because he believes that his faith should be more accessible to people. But the issue on it is, where are the imams coming from and what messages are they preaching? Because we have got loads of really good imams in the UK who actually work within the contest strategy or work within our prisons trying to address this extremist jihadist narrative that's being developed at various places around the country.
Well, Kevin, thank you very much. Great stuff. That Kevin Hurley there, former head of counter-terrorism at City of London Police, just reacting to Suella Braverman's new counter-terrorism report. Now, the mum of three who was jailed for illegally obtaining abortion tablets to end her pregnancy during lockdown, hugely controversial case, really strong opinions on both sides of this. Well, she had her sentence reduced and will now soon be released from prison. Some people were saying, well, hang on a minute, this is tantamount to murder, a late-stage abortion at home. Other people saying, look, no one should ever be prosecuted for this. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Read my superstar panel that already at it. That fighting is going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
A mother who was jailed for taking abortion tablets to end her pregnancy will be released from prison after the Court of Appeal reduced her sentence. Carla Foster admitted to illegally procuring her own abortion when she was between 32 and 34 weeks pregnant. Foster today had her 28-month sentence halved and has been allowed to serve the remainder of her term on licence. Joining me now for more on this is the author and broadcaster Julie Cook. Julie, thank you very much. This was an incredibly controversial case when it first came round. People were saying, actually, hang on a minute, this is basically murder, and the sentence wasn't long enough. Another group of people were literally out in the street campaigning for full-term abortions. What do you think?
Well, Patrick, I'm pro-life. I'm a mum of 2 and I'm pro-life, but I'm also, if it's possible to say this, pro being compassionate and understanding. And I think this was a case of a woman who should have seen compassion and understanding. There's a lot more context that's needed, really, and we don't know enough about the context. You know, was there an ex who was a coercive person? Was the present partner coercing her? Was there other stuff going on in her life? She's a mother of 3 who's carried 3 pregnancies so far and looked after those children. What happened to make her take this drastic decision?
I think that made it all the more difficult for people to believe that she genuinely didn't really know she was pregnant initially and that there wouldn't maybe necessarily be some compassion there. I suppose that the kind of quirk with this, Julie, is if she'd have given birth to this baby and it had lived and then she'd killed it, then obviously that's murder and the prison sentence, one would imagine, would be drastically longer than it is at the moment. But because that initial process didn't happen, then it was 28 months and that has then been halved and then she's back out and about and people are wondering whether or not that's justice.
Yeah, and I can understand that. As you rightly say, a few inches of the birth canal is the difference between it being a human being or an unborn child. I think, though, in this case, it needed compassion and understanding, and we needed to ask why. I think you rightly say, well, she should have known, and she's a mother of three, she should have known. But equally, what made this mother of three do something so drastic after three children that she's raised and looked after? I think this was a mental case issue through and through. It should have been straight to mental health facilities and looked after and analysed and asked why. I don't think jail will help her, would have helped her. She's not a risk to the general public. I just don't think in this case jail was the answer.
OK, and there was obviously a lot of concern as to whether or not this will now lead to, you know, a big concerted push for full-term abortions, etc. But look, Julie, thank you very much. I'm sorry we didn't have too much time at the end there, but it is obviously a deeply emotive topic as well. I appreciate you coming on. It's Julie Cutler, the author and broadcaster, just reacting to that deeply controversial topic. Right now, OK, Emily Carver joins me now, filling in for Jubes and Co. What's on the agenda?
Well, we're going to be discussing this.
Oh, you are?
Yes, the suspended sentence. Have we essentially decriminalised late-term abortions?
Well,
it seemed that way.
Oh, well, it's not far off it, certainly.
I mean, it's complicated, but I'm going to get the views of my panel on that. We're also going to be discussing, well, the government opening the doors to foreign construction workers.
Yes.
I mean, wasn't that why people voted for Brexit?
It was why people voted for Brexit.
They didn't want that because they saw it as depressing their wages. So we're going to be discussing that too. And also, terrorism.
Well,
Suella Braverman has raised the level. She says that it's rising anyway, the threat, so we're going to be discussing that too.
Fantastic stuff. Well, look, Emily Carver will join you for a fantastic final hour here. That will be, of course, Emily stepping in for Jubes and Co. Look, thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch throughout the course of this show. It's been an absolute firecracker. I will see you tomorrow, bang on 3 p.m. for another 3 hours of box office tally. See you tomorrow.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain for many of us at the moment and through the rest of the day. Showers for some, and in one or two spots it is dry and bright. But the rain or showers do ease later as this little weather feature moves through. It's going to push into the North Sea by the end of the day, peeling away the rain from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and central England. Still some showery bursts for northern and eastern England for a time, and also some showers arriving into the north and northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, but clear spells elsewhere. However, a bit more cloud around and slightly milder air with us, so a less cool night, 15-16 in the south. I think single figures still, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be first thing on Wednesday morning, and also there'll be some